The highway stretched before Jack Hartwell like a ribbon of regret, each mile marker another year he should have been here and wasn't. 52 years old and driving a truck that had seen better decades, just like the man behind the wheel. The afternoon sun caught the silver threading through his dark hair, illuminated the deep lines around eyes that had witnessed too much in too many countries that weren't home. Colorado was 3 days behind him. Maine was 30 miles ahead, and somewhere between those 2 points sat the weight of everything he had lost without realizing he was losing it. Atlas shifted in the passenger seat, the big German shepherd's graying muzzle resting on paws that had carried him through rubble in Kandahar, through smoke in Fallujah, through 12 years of service that left scars you couldn't see but never stopped feeling. The dog was 8 now, officially retired 6 months ago, same month Jack had turned in his own papers. 2 old soldiers heading towards something that felt less like a destination and more like a reckoning. The radio played low, some country song about going home, and Jack reached over to turn it off. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that makes a man think, and thinking was the last thing Jack Hartwell wanted to do right now. But the mind doesn't take orders the way enlisted men do. His thoughts drifted back to the phone call 6 months ago, the one that changed everything. It had been 3 a.m, Mountain Time. The voice on the other end belonged to Sheriff Tom Granger, a name Jack hadn't heard in 30 years but recognized instantly. They had graduated high school together, back when the future seemed like something bright instead of something you survived. Tom's voice carried the careful weight of a man who had delivered bad news before and knew there was no good way to do it. "Your father passed last night, Jack. Heart attack. Quick." He didn't suffer. Jack had thanked him, handled the arrangements from 1,500 miles away, sent money for a funeral he didn't attend, told himself it was because of work, because of obligations, because the Air Force didn't give you bereavement leave for a father you hadn't spoken to in 3 years. But the truth was simpler and harder than any excuse. He hadn't gone because he didn't know what to say to a dead man he'd barely known when he was alive. Daniel Hartwell had been a shadow in Jack's childhood, a presence more than a parent, home from work just long enough to eat in silence, gone before breakfast, weekends spent in the barn or the basement or anywhere that wasn't the living room, where his wife tried to pretend they were a normal family. Jack's mother had done her best to fill both roles, but cancer took her when Jack was 19, fresh out of boot camp, too young to understand that some losses hollow you out in ways you don't discover for decades. After that, the distance between father and son had stopped being measured in miles and started being measured in silence. A Christmas card here, a birthday call there, conversations that never went deeper than weather and health. Jack had built a career, served his country, led men into combat, earned medals whose names he could barely remember. And through it all, his father remained a mystery, a man who shared Jack's last name, but not his life. Now Daniel Hartwell was gone, and all that remained was Clearwater Ridge, the farm that had been in the family for 4 generations, sitting on 80 acres of Maine woods and lakeshore like a monument to everything Jack had run from. The GPS announced his exit in a cheerful voice that felt obscene given the circumstances. Jack took the ramp, merged onto Route 17, and felt his chest tighten with each familiar landmark. There was the gas station where he'd bought his first pack of cigarettes at 15, the diner where Julie Morrison had broken up with him the week before prom, the Presbyterian church where his mother's funeral had been held on a January morning so cold the ground was too frozen to dig, and they'd had to wait until March to bury her. Pine Harbor hadn't changed much, which somehow made it worse. Same streets, same buildings, same people, probably. Aged like Jack had aged, but still rooted here in a way he'd never been. He drove through town without stopping, ignoring the curious looks from folks who might or might not remember Daniel Hartwell's son, and headed north toward the lake. The trees closed in on both sides of the road, pine and birch and maple standing sentinel like they had for 100 years. Sunlight filtered through in golden shafts that looked like something from a postcard, beautiful in a way that made Jack's throat tight. He'd forgotten how quiet it could be out here, how the silence wasn't empty, but full of things you couldn't quite name. Wind through branches, birds you couldn't see, the whisper of water somewhere beyond the tree line. He almost missed the turn. The driveway was overgrown, nearly swallowed by brush and wild grass that should have been cut months ago. Jack eased the truck between encroaching branches, wincing as they scraped the paint, and emerged into a clearing that punched the breath right out of his chest. Clearwater Ridge looked like a place where time had not just passed, but surrendered. The farmhouse stood defiant but wounded, a two-story structure of dark wood and stone that had weathered a century of Maine winters, but was losing the fight against entropy. Shutters hung crooked. The porch sagged in the middle like a broken back. Moss crept across the roof in patterns that looked organic and ominous. Nature reclaiming what man had borrowed. The barn to the left was in worse shape, its red paint faded to the color of dried blood, doors hanging open like a mouth caught mid-scream. The smaller outbuildings scattered across the property had various degrees of collapse working on them. Roofs caved in, walls leaning at angles that defied physics and good sense. But it was the lake beyond that held Jack's attention. Clearwater Lake spread out like a sheet of hammered silver, reflecting the late afternoon sky in shades of gold and amber. The water was so still it looked like glass, and for a moment Jack could almost see himself at 10 years old, standing on the dock with his father's fishing rod, waiting for a bite that never came while the man beside him smoked cigarettes and stared at the horizon like he was searching for something that wasn't there. Jack killed the engine. The silence rushed in immediately, profound and accusing. Atlas lifted his head, ears forward, reading the environment with senses sharper than any technology the military had ever given Jack. The dog's body language spoke of caution, not fear, alertness, not aggression. He knew this place the way he knew every forward operating base they had ever deployed to by threat assessment and instinct. "Good boy," Jack murmured, reaching over to scratch behind ears that had gone gray at the edges. Atlas leaned into the touch, and for a moment they were just two old friends acknowledging what they both knew. This wasn't going to be easy. Jack stepped out of the truck, boots crunching on gravel that was more weeds than stone, and stood for a longer moment just breathing. The air tasted different here, clean in a way that made the past 26 years of military bases and foreign deserts feel like something he'd imagined. Pine sap and lake water, and earth that hadn't been poisoned by burn pits or scorched by artillery. Atlas jumped down beside him, immediately going into what Jack called recon mode, nose to the ground, moving in careful circles to map the territory. Jack watched him work, grateful for the distraction, then forced himself to look at the house. Really look at it. His father had lived here alone for 10 years after Jack's mother died. 10 years of solitude in a house built for a family. What kind of man does that, Jack thought? What kind of man stays in a place filled with ghosts and calls it home? The front door wasn't locked. Jack wasn't sure if that was small-town trust or his father's final act of not giving a damn. Either way, it swung open with a horror movie creak that would have been funny if Jack's hands weren't shaking. The interior was dim, curtains drawn against the afternoon light like his father had been living in permanent twilight. Jack found a switch, flipped it, and nothing happened. Right. The power was probably shut off months ago. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Not decay, thank God, but dust and old wood and something faintly sweet he couldn't place. The beam of his phone cut through darkness, illuminating a living room that looked frozen in time. The same furniture from Jack's childhood, the same faded rug, the same television that had probably stopped working during the Bush administration. Which Bush, Jack couldn't say. But it was the photographs that stopped him cold. They covered the walls like wallpaper, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Black and white, color, Polaroids, informal portraits, all mixed together in a collage that spoke of obsession or devotion, or maybe both. Jack stepped closer, playing his light across faces he knew and faces he'd never seen. There was his mother, young and smiling in a summer dress, standing in front of this very house when it looked new and loved. There was Jack himself at maybe 5 years old, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish that was almost as big as he was. His father beside him, hand on Jack's shoulder, face serious but eyes warm in a way Jack couldn't remember ever seeing in person. He moved along the wall, chronological order becoming apparent. Jack at 10, 12, 15. School photos, Little League, one memorable image of Jack in his first uniform, fresh from basic training, standing at attention with pride so evident it hurt to look at. And beside it, a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age. Local hero serves third tour. The photo showed Jack in desert camo, older, harder, eyes that had seen things the boy in the earlier pictures couldn't imagine. His father had kept track. Through all the years of silence, through all the distance, Daniel Hartwell had been cutting out articles and saving photos, and building a shrine to a son who thought he'd been forgotten. Jack's throat burned. His eyes stung in a way that had nothing to do with dust. He turned away from the wall, breath coming hard, and nearly tripped over Atlas, who had pressed against his leg with the solid weight of unconditional support. The dog looked up at him with amber eyes that had seen Jack at his worst and loved him anyway. And Jack knelt down, buried his face in thick fur that smelled like road trip and loyalty, and allowed himself 10 seconds of weakness. Then he stood, squared his shoulders the way 30 years of military bearing had taught him, and moved deeper into the house. The kitchen was cleaner than expected, dishes washed and put away, counters wiped down. His father's last meal, whatever it had been, left no trace. The table held a single coffee mug, turned upside down on a folded dish towel like someone who intended to come back and use it again. Jack opened the refrigerator, found it empty and unplugged, checked the cabinets, saw canned goods organized with military precision, labels facing forward, expiration dates in order. His father had been a Marine, Jack remembered. Korea, early 50s, came back with shrapnel in his leg and nightmares he never talked about. The kind of war people forgot about between the big ones. The kind of service that shaped a man and then expected him to just come home and be normal. Maybe they were more alike than Jack wanted to admit. He found the basement door behind the pantry, hesitated, then pulled it open. Stairs descended into darkness so complete his phone's flashlight barely made a dent. Atlas whined, low and uncertain, the first time Jack had heard that sound in years. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. But something drew Jack down those steps anyway. Some pull he couldn't name, like a frequency only broken men could hear. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step an announcement of intrusion. The temperature dropped 10 degrees between the kitchen and the basement floor, and Jack's breath began to fog. The basement was unfinished. Dirt floor and stone walls that wept moisture. The bones of the house exposed and honest. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in his father's precise handwriting. Christmas decorations. Tax records 1975 to 1980, tools, camping gear, a life organized and archived like a military supply depot. But it was the workshop in the corner that drew Jack's attention. A heavy wooden workbench, scarred with decades of use, tools hung on pegboard with the kind of order that spoke of a man who needed control in a world that refused to give it. Jack ran his hand along the bench's surface, felt the grooves and burns and stains, each one a story he'd never know. Then Atlas barked, sharp, insistent, the tone he used when he'd found something that mattered. Jack turned, played his light toward where the buying stood rigid, nose pointed at the floor near the far wall. At first, Jack saw nothing but dirt. Then he noticed the pattern. The way the dust had settled in a perfect rectangle, like something had been moved recently. He knelt, brushed away loose earth, and felt his fingers hit wood. Not floorboards, a hatch. His pulse kicked up the way it used to before a mission, that electric anticipation of discovery mixed with dread. He found the edge, worked his fingers under, and pulled. The hatch resisted, swollen with moisture or age or stubbornness, then gave way with a sound like a coffin opening. Beneath it, metal steps descended into darkness, deeper than the basement. Deeper than Jack wanted to go, but knew he would anyway, because that's what you did when the past opened its mouth and invited you in. Atlas didn't wait for permission. The dog went down first, training taking over, clearing the space the way he'd cleared 1,000 rooms in 1,000 compounds. Jack followed, one hand on the ladder, the other holding his phone up like a torch against the underworld. The space at the bottom was bigger than it should have been, a room carved out of earth and reinforced with concrete and steel. The air was dry, temperature controlled, and Jack's mind immediately cataloged what that meant. Power source, ventilation. This wasn't a storm shelter. This was a bunker. His light swept across the room, catching details that assembled themselves into a picture he didn't want to see, but couldn't look away from. Radio equipment, military grade, the kind you needed clearance to own. Maps on the walls, topographical surveys of Pine Harbor and the surrounding counties, marked with notations in his father's handwriting. A desk with a laptop, closed, connected to battery backups that hummed with stored power. This was a command center. His father had built a command center under his own house, and Jack had never known it existed. He moved to the desk, hesitated, then opened the laptop. It booted immediately, no password protection, like his father had been expecting someone, like he'd been expecting Jack. The desktop was minimal, just a few folders with names that made Jack's skin crawl. Surveillance, evidence, the mission, and one labeled simply, for Jack. His hand hovered over the mouse, trembling in a way it hadn't since his first firefight. Atlas pressed against his leg, warm and solid, and Jack clicked the folder. Inside was a single video file dated 6 months and 2 weeks ago, 3 days before his father died. Jack's stomach dropped. He knew what this was before he hit play, but knowing didn't make it easier. His father's face filled the screen, older than Jack remembered, weathered like driftwood, but the eyes were sharp and clear. Daniel Hartwell sat in this very chair, in this very room, looking directly at the camera with an expression Jack had never seen on him before. Not anger, not sadness, purpose. The audio crackled, then his father's voice came through, rough from decades of cigarettes but steady as bedrock. Jack, if you're watching this, I'm gone. Probably dead. Almost certainly dead if I'm being honest. And if you found this room, you're wondering what the hell your old man was up to down here. Daniel leaned back, the chair creaking off camera. I owe you an explanation. Hell, I owe you about 50 years of explanations. But we don't always get what we're owed, do we? You learned that in the service. I learned it in Korea. Some debts don't get paid. They just compound until the weight of them breaks something. He paused, looked away from the camera, and when he looked back, there was something raw in his face. I wasn't a good father, Jack. I know that. Your mother tried to tell me, tried to show me how to be the man you needed. But I was too busy fighting wars that ended decades before you were born. The enemy wasn't over there in the end. It was in here. He tapped his temple. The demons we bring home don't wear uniforms. They wear our faces and speak with our voice and tell us we don't deserve the love people tried to give us. I believe those voices, son. And by the time I figured out they were lying, you were gone, and I didn't know how to call you back. Jack's vision blurred. He wiped his eyes angry, but the tears kept coming. On screen, his father continued, but I'm not recording this to apologize. Though God knows I should, I'm recording this because I need you to finish something I started. Something that got me killed, probably. Something that needs a man who knows how to fight and won't back down when the enemy shows his face. Daniel stood, moved to one of the maps on the wall, pointed at locations Jack couldn't quite see. There's a man in this town named Marcus Brennan. Used to be my business partner. Used to be my friend. Now he's something else entirely, and he's been getting away with it for too long. Murder, money laundering, corruption that goes deeper than you'd believe in a town this small. I've been gathering evidence for 5 years, Jack. 5 years of surveillance, documentation, proof. He turned back to the camera. But proof doesn't matter if you're dead before you can use it. And I think my time's running short. Brennan knows I'm on to him. I've been careful, but careful only gets you so far against a man who's got law enforcement in his pocket and no conscience left to slow him down. Daniel moved closer to the camera, and Jack could see the resemblance. The same jawline, the same set to the shoulders. The same eyes that had seen too much and refused to look away. I'm asking you to finish this, son. Not because it's your duty, not because you owe me anything, because you don't. I'm asking because you're the only man I trust to see it through. You're a warrior. You've fought in deserts and mountains and places whose names I can't pronounce. But this fight is here. This fight is home, and home is worth fighting for, even if you haven't been here in a long time. The video flickered, and for a moment Jack thought it was ending, but his father wasn't done. One more thing, Jack. In the cabinet behind you, there's a journal. Black leather, lock on the front. The combination is your mother's birthday. Month, day, year. Inside is everything you need to know about Brennan, about what I've found, about what I couldn't prove alone. Read it, understand it, then decide if you're the man I think you are. Daniel Hartwell looked directly into the camera, and for the first time in Jack's memory, he smiled. It was sad and proud and full of a love that had never found the right words when he was alive. I'm proud of you, son. I should have said it more. Should have said it at all, really. But I'm proud of the man you became, despite having me as a father. Now come home, finish the mission, keep the watch. The screen went black. Jack sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the hum of equipment and the sound of his own breathing. Atlas lay at his feet, patient as stone, waiting for orders that Jack didn't have the clarity to give. Finally he stood, turned, saw the cabinet his father had mentioned, built into the wall behind the desk. It wasn't locked, which seemed almost careless, until Jack realized his father had known exactly who would be standing here. Had known his son would find this room because he'd raised a man who couldn't walk away from an unfinished mission, even if he wanted to. The journal was exactly where his father said it would be. Heavy, leather-bound, lock mechanism that looked military issue. Jack pulled it out, felt the weight of it in his hands, and thought about how secrets always weigh more than they should. His mother's birthday, July 14th, 1948. Jack's fingers shook as he spun the combination, each number a memory. Her smile, her laugh, the way she'd smelled like vanilla and hope even when the cancer was killing her. The lock clicked open, and Jack pulled the journal free. The first page was a letter, handwritten, addressed to him. Jack, it began, if you've gotten this far, you're already in danger. Marcus Brennan doesn't leave loose ends, and the moment you start asking questions, you become a loose end. But you're also a United States Air Force officer, retired or not, and officers don't run from fights just because the odds are bad. Jack almost smiled. His father understood him better than he'd thought. He flipped through the journal, scanning pages filled with meticulous notes, dates, times, conversations recorded in shorthand. Photographs tucked between pages showed Marcus Brennan, a man in his late 40s with silver hair and the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you saw the eyes. There were pictures of meetings, cash exchanges, documents that Jack's trained eye immediately recognized as financial records that shouldn't exist outside of a courtroom. But it was the last section that stopped his heart. A list of names, 4 of them, written in order with dates beside each. Thomas Whitfield, April 2008, died construction accident. Michael Foster, November 2012, died house fire. Roy Cassidy, March 2021, died car accident. Daniel Hartwell, October 24, died heart attack. 4 names, 4 dead men, and beside each name, in his father's careful script, 1 word, murdered. Jack's hands clenched on the journal hard enough to bend the leather. The last name on the list had a note below it. Roy didn't die, he ran. Find him before Marcus does. He knows where the bodies are buried, literally. Atlas growled, low and deep, his body going rigid. Jack's military training kicked in before his conscious mind caught up, hand dropping to his hip, where a sidearm should have been but wasn't because he was retired now. Just a civilian in his dead father's secret bunker, holding evidence that painted a target on his back. The growl intensified. Jack killed the laptop screen, plunging the room into darkness except for the faint glow of battery backups. He moved to the ladder, muscles remembering how to be silent even after 6 months of retirement, and climbed quickly with Atlas right behind him. At the top, he paused, listening. The house above was quiet, but quiet had textures when you'd spent decades in combat zones. This quiet had weight to it, presence, like the air itself was holding its breath. Jack eased the hatch closed, left it unlatched, and moved through the basement to the stairs. Atlas stayed close, hackles raised, every line of his body screaming alert. They went up together, clearing each step, and emerged into the kitchen where the late afternoon sun slanted through dusty windows in shafts of gold that made everything look peaceful and wrong at the same time. A truck engine rumbled outside, tires on gravel. Atlas barked once, sharp and definitive, and Jack moved to the window, keeping to the side, looking out at an angle the way you did when you didn't want to present a target. A black Mercedes SUV sat in the driveway, expensive and out of place, engine running. As Jack watched, the driver's door opened and a man stepped out. Silver hair, good suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes even from 30 feet away. Marcus Brennan had come calling. Jack's mind raced through options with the cold calculation that had kept him alive through 4 tours. He was unarmed, alone except for a retired military dog, in a house he barely knew with exits he hadn't mapped, and the man walking toward his front door was, according to a dead man's journal, a murderer who'd killed 4 people and gotten away with what for 16 years. The smart move was to stay quiet, let Brennan knock, let him leave when no one answered. The smart move was to call the police, except his father's notes made it clear local law enforcement wasn't clean. The smart move was probably to get in his truck and drive back to Colorado and pretend he'd never found that bunker or that journal or that video. But Jack Hartwell hadn't stayed in the military for 26 years by making smart moves. He'd stayed by making the right ones, and the right move here was to answer the door and look in the eyes of the man who'd killed his father. He moved through the house with Atlas at his heel, unlocked the front door, and pulled it open just as Marcus Brennan raised his hand to knock. For a moment they stood there, two men on opposite sides of a threshold, sizing each other up the way predators do. Brennan recovered first, smile widening into something that might have passed for friendly if you didn't know how to read the threat beneath it. "You must be Jack Hartwell," he said, voice smooth as expensive bourbon. "I heard you were coming to town. I'm Marcus Brennan. I was a friend of your father's. I'm so sorry for your loss." Jack didn't take the offered hand, just stood there letting the silence stretch, watching Brennan's smile falter at the edges. Atlas sat beside him, not growling but radiating the kind of controlled aggression that made people nervous. Brennan's eyes flicked to the dog, back to Jack. "I know this must be a difficult time," he continued, recovering his composure. "Your father was a good man, a pillar of this community. His death was a shock to all of us." "Was it?" Jack said. His voice came out flat, military neutral, giving nothing away. "Of course," Brennan said. "Daniel and I had been friends for years. Business partners, actually, which is part of why I'm here." He reached into his jacket, moving slowly like he was aware of exactly how dangerous the man in front of him could be, and pulled out a folder. "There are some financial matters we need to discuss. Your father and I had a business arrangement, and there are some outstanding debts that need to be settled. I thought it would be better to address this now before things get complicated." Jack took the folder, didn't open it. "What kind of debts?" Brennan's smile went thin. $300,000, Jack. Your father borrowed it for renovations to this property. Improvements that were supposed to increase the value before we sold it and split the profits. Unfortunately, he passed before we could finalize the sale. But the debt remains." Jack looked at the folder in his hand, then at Brennan. "My father never borrowed money in his life." Something flashed in Brennan's eyes. There and gone so fast, Jack almost missed it. Anger, maybe, or satisfaction that the game was beginning. "I have the paperwork," Brennan said. "Signed contracts, bank records. I understand this is hard to hear, but facts are facts. Clearwater Ridge has a lien on it, Jack, and unless you can pay that debt, I'm afraid the property will have to be sold." Atlas stood, hackles rising, a low rumble building in his chest. Brennan took a step back, hands raised in a gesture of peace that fooled exactly no one. "Maybe you should think about my offer," he said, pulling a business card from his pocket and setting it on the porch railing. "I'm willing to be reasonable. Clearwater Ridge has value despite its condition. I'll give you fair market price, enough to cover the debt and leave you something to start over with. It's better than letting the bank take it." Jack didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at this man who'd stood in front of his house and lied about his father with the kind of confidence that came from years of getting away with it. Brennan backed towards his SUV, smile still in place, but eyes cold as January. "Think about it, Jack. I'll give you a week. After that, I'll have to pursue other options." He got in his vehicle, started the engine, and drove away at exactly the speed limit. Careful, controlled. A man who knew the value of appearances. Jack stood on the porch until the sound of the engine faded, until there was nothing but the whisper of wind through pine trees and the lap of water against the distant shore. Then he opened the folder Brennan had given him. Inside were contracts, photocopies of documents that looked official and felt wrong. His father's signature at the bottom of loan papers, except Jack had seen his father's handwriting in that journal, in those meticulous notes, and the signature on these contracts didn't match. Close, but not quite right in the way a forgery never is when you know what you're looking for. Marcus Brennan had just made his first mistake. He'd assumed Jack wouldn't know his own father's handwriting, assumed grief and distance would make him careless, assumed wrong. Jack looked at Atlas, who stared back with eyes that had seen this pattern before, the enemy revealing himself. The mission parameters becoming clear, the moment before the fight when you had to decide if you were walking toward it or away. There was never really a choice, Jack pulled out his phone, took pictures of every document in the folder, then went back inside. The house felt different now, less like a tomb and more like a forward operating base. He had work to do, intelligence to gather, a mission to plan. His father had asked him to finish what he started, and Jack Hartwell didn't leave missions unfinished. Not in Kandahar, not in Fallujah, and not here in Pine Harbor, Maine, where the enemy wore expensive suits instead of suicide vests, but was just as deadly. He went back down to the bunker, Atlas following, and pulled the journal out again. This time he read it from beginning to end, absorbing every detail, every name, every scrap of evidence his father had died collecting. The picture it painted was uglier than Jack had imagined. Money laundering through construction projects, bribes to local officials, and at the center of it all, Marcus Brennan building an empire on the bodies of men who'd gotten in his way. 4 men dead, 3 definitely, 1 possibly alive and in hiding. And now Jack Hartwell, son of victim number 4, sitting in a secret bunker reading his father's last testament like scripture. The last page of the journal had a list, numbered 1 through 7, with only the first item crossed off. Tasks, Jack realized. Things his father had planned to do but ran out of time to finish. Restore the lighthouse, rebuild the dock, train the next generation, protect the vulnerable, expose the truth, find Roy, keep the watch. 7 tasks, 7 ways to honor a man who'd never learned how to say he loved his son when he was alive but had spent his last years trying to protect him from beyond the grave. Jack ran his finger over the words, feeling the indent where his father's pen had pressed into paper, and made a decision that felt less like choosing and more like surrendering to gravity. He would stay. He would finish the list. He would find out what happened to Roy Cassidy and expose what Marcus Brennan had done and keep the watch his father had asked him to keep. Not because Daniel Hartwell had been a good father. He hadn't been. Not because Jack owed him anything. He didn't. But because some fights were bigger than the men who started them, and some promises mattered more when they were made to the dead than they ever did to the living. Jack closed the journal, stood, and looked around the bunker his father had built in secret, a command center for a one-man war against corruption in a town too small to matter to anyone except the people who lived here. It was crazy. It was doomed. It was exactly the kind of mission Jack had spent his entire adult life training for. Atlas whined softly, the question clear. Are we doing this? Jack reached down, scratched behind the dog's ears, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for 6 months, maybe longer, maybe for years. Yeah, boy, he said. We're doing this. Above them, the old house creaked in the wind. Below them, the earth held its secrets. And somewhere out there, Marcus Brennan was making phone calls and covering tracks and doing whatever men like him did when a new threat appeared on the horizon. But Jack Hartwell had faced threats before, had stared down enemies in deserts and mountains and places where the rules were written in blood and survival. Pine Harbor, Maine might be different territory, but the fundamentals were the same. Know your enemy, protect your assets, complete the mission. His father had started a war. Now Jack would finish it. The watch was his now, and he intended to keep it. Morning came to Clearwater Ridge like an apology the world didn't mean. Pale light filtered through curtains Jack had finally opened, dust motes dancing in the shafts like memories trying to take form. He'd spent the night in his father's chair, the journal open on his lap, reading and rereading until the words blurred into a pattern of rage and sorrow he couldn't untangle. Atlas lay at his feet, chin on paws, eyes tracking Jack's every movement with the kind of attention that came from years of knowing when a man was on the edge of something. The dog hadn't slept much either. Old soldiers never did, not when the mission brief was incomplete and the enemy's capabilities remained unknown. Jack stood, joints protesting in that way 52-year-old joints do after a night in a chair, and moved to the window. The lake spread out beyond the overgrown lawn, mirrors smooth in the windless dawn, reflecting a sky caught between night's last darkness and day's first promise. It was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, beautiful like his mother had been beautiful, quietly and without asking for recognition. Somewhere out there, Marcus Brennan was waking up in whatever expensive house a man bought with blood money, probably drinking coffee from a machine that cost more than most people's monthly rent, probably thinking about Jack Hartwell and calculating risk factors and deciding how to eliminate this new variable before it became a problem. Jack had seen that kind of thinking before, in the eyes of warlords and insurgent leaders, and men who'd convinced themselves that violence was just another business tool. The specifics changed, desert to forest, AK-47s to legal documents, but the fundamental nature of predators remained constant. They hunted, they killed, they moved on, unless someone stopped them. He went down to the bunker, needing to see it again in daylight, needing to confirm that last night hadn't been some grief-induced hallucination, but it was all still there, real as rust and twice as permanent. The radio equipment hummed with patient power. The maps stared down from walls like accusatory witnesses, and the laptop sat closed on the desk, holding God knew what other revelations in its digital memory. Jack opened it, navigated back to the main folder, and saw what he'd missed last night in his shock at finding his father's video message. More files, audio recordings labeled by date and number. Recording 1, recording 2, all the way through recording 23, the last one dated 2 weeks before his father's death. His hand hesitated over the mouse. Whatever was on these recordings had gotten Daniel Hartwell killed. Listening to them was accepting the mission fully, stepping across a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Jack had spent 6 months trying to figure out who he was without the uniform, without the rank, without the clear moral framework that military service provided. Maybe this was the answer. Maybe some men were only ever really themselves when they had an enemy to fight. He clicked recording 1. Static hissed through the speakers, then resolved into voices. His father's first, calm and measured like he was conducting a routine briefing. October 15th, 2023. Meeting between Marcus Brennan and unknown male subject. Pinewood Tavern, 9:30 p.m. I'm positioned in the parking lot, telephoto lens and parabolic microphone. The sound quality degraded, picking up ambient noise. Glasses clinking, music bleeding through walls. Then Marcus Brennan's voice, smooth and cultured, exactly as it had sounded yesterday on Jack's porch. We need to discuss the Hartwell problem. A second voice answered, rougher, older, carrying an accent that spoke of too many years smoking unfiltered cigarettes and not enough years caring about consequences. Daniel's getting too close. He's been asking questions about the Whitfield job. That was 16 years ago, Brennan said. There's no evidence left. The second voice laughed, a sound like gravel in a garbage disposal. You sure about that? Because old Daniel, he's got a way of finding things. Always has. Remember Korea? Man could smell an ambush 3 clicks out. That instinct doesn't just disappear. Jack's hands gripped the desk edge hard enough to make his knuckles white. He knew that voice. Couldn't place it yet, but recognition sat in his gut like spoiled food. Then we handle it, Brennan said. Same way we handled the others. Make it look natural. Heart attack, stroke, something age appropriate. The man's 73. No one's going to ask questions. Roy won't like it, the second voice said. Daniel's his friend. Hell, they're practically brothers. Roy will do what he's told, Brennan snapped. Or Roy will have an accident too. I've invested too much in this operation to let sentiment ruin it now. We're looking at $40 million in the next 5 years if the harbor development goes through. $40 million, split 3 ways, tax-free. Daniel Hartwell's conscience isn't worth derailing that. The recording clicked off. Jack sat in the silence that followed, breathing hard, vision tunneling at the edges. They discussed murdering his father the way other men discuss golf handicaps. Casual, clinical. A problem to be solved with the same emotional investment as choosing which restaurant to eat at. Atlas wine pressed against Jack's leg, pulling him back from the rage spiral. Jack reached down, fingers tangling in thick fur, using the dog's solid presence as an anchor. Breathe, he told himself. Rage is fuel, not a plan. You've been angry before. Use it. Don't let it use you. He scrolled to the next recording, then the next, building a picture from fragments. Marcus Brennan's voice appeared in all of them. Always careful, always controlled, discussing bribes and falsified permits in construction projects that cut corners until they cut lives. The second voice appeared in 7 recordings, never named, never identified, but always there like a ghost at the feast. And then, in recording 12, a third voice. This one Jack knew immediately, recognition hitting like a fist to the solar plexus. Roy, this is madness. You can't seriously be considering this. His father's voice, younger than in the final video message, but still carrying that bedrock certainty. Roy Cassidy was Marcus's partner. Roy, who'd been at family barbecues and Christmas dinners. Roy, who taught Jack how to tie a bowline knot and field dress a deer. Roy Cassidy's response came quiet, defeated in a way that made it worse somehow. I don't have a choice, Daniel. He's got evidence. Photographs of that thing in Bangor. If the police see those, if my family sees those, I'm done. Career gone, marriage gone, everything gone. So instead you help him ruin this town? Jack's father's anger came through clear across the years. Roy, you're better than this. We served together. We bled together, brothers in arms, remember? That has to mean something. It means I know what I'm capable of when my back's against the wall, Roy said. And right now, my back's against the wall. I'm sorry, Daniel, but I'm in, and you need to walk away before you get hurt. The recording ended. Jack scrolled through the file list, found the entry his father had written in the journal. Roy Cassidy, March 2021, died car accident. Except the note below said Roy didn't die. He ran, which meant Roy Cassidy was out there somewhere, alive, carrying the weight of whatever deal he'd made with the devil in a good suit. A man who'd betrayed his friend, but apparently drawn the line at participating in murder. A man who'd faked his own death 3 years ago and vanished. Find him, his father had written. He knows where the bodies are buried, literally. Jack needed information, needed local knowledge, needed someone who'd been here through all of this and could fill in the gaps his father's surveillance hadn't captured. He needed Frank Sullivan. Moose, everyone called him, a nickname earned in Vietnam when he'd carried a wounded lieutenant 3 miles through jungle so thick you needed a machete to breathe. Jack's father had served with Moose in Korea, different war, but same brotherhood. They'd stayed close after, the kind of friendship that didn't need constant contact to remain solid. If anyone knew the truth about what had happened in Pine Harbor over the past 2 decades, it would be Moose. Jack found the address in his father's journal, a rural route number that meant nothing to someone who didn't know the area. But his phone had GPS, and 30 minutes later, he was driving down a dirt road that looked like it predated the internal combustion engine, trees pressing in on both sides like they were trying to reclaim the path. The house that emerged from the woods was small, tidy, a log cabin that looked hand-built with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of a man who had time and skill and nothing but respect for both. Smoke curled from the chimney despite the mild morning, and as Jack pulled up, he saw a figure on the porch, rocking chair moving in a slow rhythm that matched the wind through the pines. Frank Sullivan was 73 years old and looked like he could still hike 20 miles with a full pack. Lean in that way old soldiers get when they never stop moving, face weathered like good leather, eyes that tracked Jack's truck with the calm assessment of a man who'd learned early that survival meant seeing threats before they became problems. His white hair was military short, and he wore flannel and denim like a uniform that actually fit who he'd become. Atlas recognized him before Jack did, tail starting to wag, a rare show of immediate acceptance. Dogs knew things people spent years figuring out. The old man stood as Jack got out, movement smooth despite the years, and something in his face shifted when he got a clear look at who was standing in his driveway. Recognition, understanding, and something that looked like relief. Jack Hartwell, Moose said, voice carrying easy across the distance. Your father said you'd come. Didn't believe him at first. Figured you'd sell the place and disappear. Glad I was wrong. Jack climbed the porch steps, hand extended, and Moose's grip was exactly what he expected. Firm, honest, the handshake of a man who'd never learned to lie with his body even if his mouth occasionally needed to. You knew what he was doing, Jack said. Wasn't a question. Moose gestured to a second chair, waited until Jack sat before settling back into his own. Known for about 3 years. Your daddy came to me when he started putting pieces together. Asked if I'd help, asked if I'd keep watch if something happened to him. And you said yes. Of course I said yes. We were Marines together, Korea, back when wars had the decency to declare themselves proper. You don't leave a brother to fight alone just because the enemy changed uniforms. Atlas settled between them, head on Moose's boot, and the old man reached down to scratch ears with the automatic affection of someone who'd always had dogs and always would. Moose studied Jack for a long moment, eyes seeing past the surface to the bones underneath. You look like him, you know, not just the face, the way you hold yourself, like you're still on deployment even though the deployment ended. Jack didn't know how to respond to that, so he went tactical instead. Marcus Brennan came to see me yesterday. Claims my father owed him $300,000. Moose snorted. Marcus Brennan claims a lot of things. Man's made lying into an art form. Your daddy never borrowed a dime in his life. Owned that property free and clear, same as his father before him. What Brennan's trying to do is steal land he can't buy legal. Why the land? What's so important about Clearwater Ridge? Waterfront access, Moose said. The whole lake shore from your property north is conservation land. Can't be developed. But Brennan's got plans for a resort, marina, condos, the whole tourist trap package. Needs your land as the access point. Without it, his $40 million development is just $40 million of useless lake view. So he kills my father to get it. Moose's jaw tightened. That's what your daddy believed. Couldn't prove it, though. Death certificate said heart attack. Natural causes. No autopsy ordered because why would there be? 73-year-old man living alone. History of high blood pressure. Textbook cardiac event. Except it wasn't. Except it wasn't. Moose agreed. Your father had a physical 2 months before he died. Doctor said his heart was strong as a man 20 years younger. All those years chopping wood and hauling water kept him fit. Then suddenly he's dead in his kitchen. No warning, no struggle, just gone. Jack felt the anger building again, forced it down. Who else knows what my father was investigating? Moose was quiet for a moment, rocking chair creaking. That's complicated. Your daddy played this close. Didn't trust local Wayne law, not after he figured out the sheriff's department was on Brennan's payroll. But there's a few folks who know pieces. Sheriff Tom Granger, for one. He was clean, still is, but he's walking a tightrope trying to do his job while half his deputies are dirty. Tom Granger, Jack repeated, the name clicking into place. We went to high school together. He remembered, Moose said. Asked about you after your daddy died. Wanted to know if you were coming home. I think he was hoping you would. Tom's been trying to build a case against Brennan for 2 years, but every time he gets close, evidence disappears or witnesses recant. He could use someone Brennan can't intimidate. Jack filed that away. Who else? Woman named Sarah Chen, engineer, moved here from Portland about 8 years ago. Your daddy hired her to inspect some of Brennan's construction projects. Unofficial-like. She found violations. Serious ones. Buildings that shouldn't have passed inspection, safety standards ignored, corners cut until they weren't corners anymore. Just straight lines to disaster. And she reported it. Made enemies, lost contracts, got threatened enough that she stopped taking on work related to Brennan's projects. But she kept copies of everything, same as your daddy. If you need technical evidence about what Brennan's built and how it's going to fail eventually, Sarah's your expert. Jack nodded slowly, pieces assembling. Anyone else? Moose's expression darkened. Bobby Cassidy, Roy's son, 32 years old, Marine Corps veteran, 2 tours in Afghanistan, came back different. Way we all do. Lives alone, works construction when he can get it, mostly keeps to himself. His daddy's supposed death near about broke him. Supposed death, Jack said. Moose met his eyes. You found your father's notes about Roy. I found a lot of things, including a recording where Roy admits to being part of Brennan's operation. The old man's chair stopped rocking. You angry about that? Jack considered. I'm angry about all of it, but mostly I'm angry that good men got backed into corners where the only way out looked like betrayal. Roy made bad choices, but Brennan's the one who engineered the situation that forced those choices. Moose nodded, something like approval in his expression. That's a mature way of seeing it. Your father felt the same. Spent the last year before he died trying to find Roy, trying to bring him in safe. Never managed it. But he left notes about where to look, if you're interested. I'm interested. The old man stood, moved inside, came back with an envelope that looked like it had been handled often. Edges worn soft. This came for me 3 months after your daddy died. Postmark from Canada, no return address. Inside was a letter from Roy in a USB drive. What's on the drive? Haven't looked, Moose said. Letter said it was for Daniel's son, if he ever showed up. Roy must have had a way of knowing when your daddy passed. Must have been watching from wherever he's hiding. Jack took the envelope, felt the weight of the drive inside. Why send it to you instead of directly to me? Because Roy's smart enough to know Brennan monitors the obvious connections. Your address, your email, anything directly tied to Daniel Hartwell's family would be compromised. But an old Vietnam vet living in the woods? No reason for Brennan to waste resources on surveillance there. Jack pocketed the envelope. I need to talk to Bobby Cassidy. Moose's expression went careful. Bobby's not in a good place, Jack. His mother remarried and moved to Florida. His father's dead, far as he knows. The Corps gave him skills, but took things too. PTSD, anger issues. The kind of damage that doesn't show on the outside, but runs deep. Sounds like someone I know, Jack said quietly. Maybe so, Moose allowed. Maybe that's why you should talk to him. Man like Bobby, he needs to know his father's sacrifice meant something. Needs to know the fight's not over just because one soldier fell. Where can I find him? Moose pulled out his phone, old model that probably still had a physical keyboard, scrolled through contacts. Works odd jobs around town. Currently doing carpentry work at the old Riverside Church renovation project. You'll recognize him. Looks like Roy, moves like a Marine, carries himself like a man waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jack stood. Thank you, Moose, for watching my father's back, for keeping faith. The old man stood too, and this time when they shook hands, it felt like more than greeting. Felt like enlistment. We weren't just Marines together, Jack. We were brothers. Your daddy died fighting, but he didn't die alone. Had me in his corner. Had Tom. Had folks who believed in what he was trying to do. Now you're here, and the fight continues. That's how it should be. That's what brotherhood means. Atlas jumped down from the porch, ready to move, always ready. Jack followed, stopped at his truck, looked back. Moose, what happened to the fourth man? The journal mentions 4 names: Thomas Whitfield, Michael Foster, Roy Cassidy, my father. But Dad's notes talk about 4 brothers from the war, 4 men who made a promise. You, my father, Roy. Who was the 4th? Moose's face went still, carved from old wood and older pain. Michael Foster. He was our lieutenant in Korea, best officer I ever served under. Saved my life twice, Roy's once, your father's probably a dozen times. After the war, Mike stayed local, became a contractor, built half the houses in Pine Harbor over 30 years. The journal says he died in a house fire, Jack said, 2012. Moose nodded. His own house. Electrical fire, they said. But Mike Foster had been an electrician in the Corps before he was an officer. Man knew wiring better than most people know their own names. The idea that he'd have faulty electrical in his own home was like saying a sniper forgot which end of the rifle the bullet comes out. Brennan killed him. Can't prove it, Moose said. But yeah, we believe so. Mike had started asking questions about one of Brennan's projects, luxury condos that went up fast and cheap. Mike suspected the wiring wasn't up to code, started making noise about inspections. 3 weeks later, his house burned down with him in it, and no one investigated. Small town, Moose said. Fire marshal was Brennan's cousin. Draw your own conclusions. Jack felt the shape of it now, the conspiracy spreading like roots through bedrock. Hidden but fundamental. 4 brothers, 4 men who'd survived Korea and come home to build lives in a town they loved. And Marcus Brennan had systematically eliminated 3 of them over 16 years. I'm going to end him, Jack said. Wasn't a threat or a boast, just a statement of operational intent. Moose smiled thin and sharp. Your father said the same thing. I told him he couldn't do it alone. I'm telling you the same. You want to take down Marcus Brennan, you're going to need an army. Then help me build one. The old man's smile widened. Son, I thought you'd never ask. Riverside Church sat on the edge of town, white clapboard and faded dreams, the kind of building that had stood through a century of prayers and was starting to wonder if anyone was listening. Scaffolding wrapped the east side like a skeleton, trying to hold together a body that wanted to fall. The sound of a hammer echoed across the parking lot, rhythmic and lonely. One man working in a space meant for community. Jack parked near the entrance, Atlas immediately alert to the new environment. Through the open door, he could see a figure on a ladder, broad shoulders moving with the efficient economy of someone who'd learned to work through pain and didn't see the point in stopping. Bobby Cassidy was 32 and looked older in the way combat veterans do. Not physically aged, but weighted, carrying invisible loads that bent the spine and shadowed the eyes. He had his father's build, compact and powerful, dark hair cut high and tight in a style that said the Corps might have let him go, but he hadn't let go of the Corps. Jeans and a flannel shirt, tool belt riding low, movements precise, even with fatigue written in every line of his body. He didn't turn when Jack and Atlas entered, just kept hammering, driving nails with the kind of focused intensity that looked less like construction and more like meditation through violence. Bobby Cassidy, Jack said, not loud, just enough to carry. The hammering stopped. Bobby's shoulders tensed, the whole body language shifting into something alert and potentially dangerous. He climbed down the ladder with controlled speed, turned, and Jack saw Roy Cassidy's face looking back at him across 30 years in a lifetime of difference. The eyes were what clinched it, haunted, angry, searching for something to fight because fighting was easier than feeling. Bobby's gaze flicked to Atlas, to Jack, back to the dog. "Military working dog," he said. "I can tell by the way he moves. And you're military too. Officer probably, you've got that command posture." "Jack Hartwell," Jack said. "I knew your father." The softness vanished. Bobby's jaw tightened. "My father's dead. 3 years now. So unless you're here to tell me something I don't know, I've got work to do." "I knew your father before he died," Jack said. "And I'm here to tell you something you don't know. Roy Cassidy is alive." The hammer fell from Bobby's hand, clattered on the floor loud as a gunshot. The younger man stood frozen, face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Denial, hope, anger. Back to denial. "That's not funny." "It's not meant to be," Jack said. "My father was Daniel Hartwell. He died 6 months ago investigating the same man who made your father disappear. I found evidence, recordings, a trail that suggests Roy faked his death to escape Marcus Brennan's control." Bobby's hands clenched into fists. "If he's alive, where is he? Why hasn't he come home? Why leave me thinking he was dead?" "Because coming home would get him killed for real," Jack said, "and probably get you killed too. Brennan doesn't leave loose ends. Your father became a loose end when he tried to back out of their arrangement. Faking his death was the only way to protect you." The younger man turned away, shoulders shaking, and Jack recognized the signs. Combat breathing. 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out. The technique they taught to keep panic at bay when the mortar started falling. Bobby was fighting for control and barely winning. Atlas moved forward without command, pressed against Bobby's leg, offering the same solid presence he'd given Jack 1,000 times. Bobby looked down at the boy, something breaking in his expression, and sank into a crouch, hands bearing in thick fur. "I thought it was my fault," Bobby said, voice raw. "Thought maybe I'd pushed him too hard. Been too angry about him drinking, about the mistakes he made. Thought maybe he drove off that bridge because living with me was harder than dying." Jack moved closer, keeping his voice level. "Your father made choices that hurt you, but he loved you enough to die protecting you. That's not nothing, Bobby. That's everything." The young man looked up, tears cutting tracks through dust on his face. "How do you know? How can you be sure he's alive?" "Because he sent me evidence," Jack said. "USB drive with files my father couldn't access alone. Roy's insurance policy probably. Proof of what Brennan did, where the bodies are buried, everything needed to bring him down. And Roy sent it through a back channel specifically so it would reach Daniel Hartwell's son." "Why you?" Bobby asked. "Why not me?" Jack considered that. "Maybe because I have less to lose. Maybe because I've got experience running operations against entrenched enemies. Or maybe because Roy knew my father would have wanted me to finish this, and he respected that enough to put the mission first." Bobby stood, wiped his face with the back of his hand, and Jack saw the exact moment the Marine reasserted control. The shoulders squared, the jaw set, the eyes cleared into something focused and dangerous. "What do you need?" "I need soldiers," Jack said. "Men who can follow orders but think for themselves. Men who understand the mission and won't break when it gets hard." "You fit that description?" "2 tours in Helmand Province," Bobby said. "Force recon. I know how to fight and I know how to win. More importantly, I know how to lose and keep fighting anyway." Jack nodded. "Then here's the situation. Marcus Brennan is responsible for at least 3 murders and probably more. He's corrupted local law enforcement, controls the town council, and has enough money to make problems disappear. My father spent 5 years building a case against him and died before he could use it. Now I'm finishing what he started, and I need people I can trust." Bobby's expression hardened. "If my father's evidence can take Brennan down, I'm in, whatever it takes." "It might take everything," Jack warned. "Brennan's already made one move trying to steal my property with fake debt. When that doesn't work, he'll escalate. These kinds of men always do. It could get violent. It could get deadly. You need to know that before you commit." The younger man smiled, and it was the saddest thing Jack had seen in a long time. Captain, I've been waiting 3 years for a mission that matters. For something bigger than myself to fight for. You're offering me a chance to honor my father and protect my home at the same time. I was in the moment you said his name. Jack extended his hand. Bobby took it, and the handshake was a contract written in shared understanding. Two combat veterans, different generations but same language, agreeing to go to war on familiar ground against an enemy who'd never faced men like them before. Atlas barked once. Approval or anticipation, hard to say. But the sound echoed in the empty church like a call to arms, and Jack felt something he hadn't felt in 6 months. Purpose, direction. The clarity that came from knowing exactly who you were fighting and why. They had the beginning of an army now. Moose, Bobby, Tom Granger, and Sarah Chen waiting to be recruited. And somewhere out there, Roy Cassidy hiding with evidence that could end Marcus Brennan's empire. The mission parameters were clear. Gather allies, secure evidence, build an airtight case, and when Brennan made his next move, because he would, be ready to counter with overwhelming force. Jack had run operations like this before in countries where the rule of law was a suggestion and violence was the common currency. Pine Harbor might look different, might smell like pine trees instead of burning trash, but the fundamentals remained the same. Know your enemy, protect your people, complete the mission. His father had started a war, now Jack would finish it. And this time, the brothers wouldn't fight alone. The watch had been passed, the army was assembling, and Marcus Brennan's time was running out faster than he knew. The USB drive sat on Jack's kitchen table like a grenade with the pin half pulled. Small, innocent looking, capable of destroying everything within its blast radius. He'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, coffee going cold in his mug, Atlas watching him with the patient intensity of a dog who knew his human was processing something bigger than breakfast. Outside, rain had started falling somewhere around dawn, steady and cold, the kind of November rain that Maine specialized in. It turned the lake pewter gray and made the trees look like they were weeping. Appropriate weather for opening a dead man's last testament. Bobby sat across from him, hands wrapped around his own mug, knuckles white with the grip. The younger man hadn't slept, judging by the shadows under his eyes and the way his gaze kept drifting to the drive like it might vanish if he looked away too long. Moose stood by the window, positioned where he could see both the driveway and the room, old habits from old wars that never quite died. Jack picked up the drive, turned it over in his fingers. The weight was wrong for what it represented. Should have been heavier. Should have felt like the evidence of murder and corruption and years of systematic evil. Instead, it was just plastic and silicon, light as a promise, fragile as hope. He plugged it into his father's laptop, the machine his old man had used to wage a one-man war from a bunker under his kitchen. The drive mounted with a soft chime that sounded obscene in the heavy silence. One folder, labeled simply The Truth. Jack double-clicked. Files cascaded open. Spreadsheets tracking money movement through shell corporations, PDF scans of falsified building permits. Photographs time-stamped and geotagged, showing meetings that weren't supposed to happen between people who swore they'd never met. And video files, dozens of them, each labeled with a date and a name. Bobby leaned forward. Is that? Jack clicked the first video. The image quality was poor, shot from distance with a telephoto lens that made everything slightly unstable. But the faces were clear enough. Marcus Brennan, younger by a decade, standing in what looked like a construction site after hours. Across from him, a man in his 50s, graying, authoritative. The timestamp read April 2008. Sound was muffled, filtered through wind and distance, but Roy Cassidy's voice came through on the recording, narrating from behind the camera. This is Thomas Whitfield, County Building Inspector. Watch what happens next. On screen, Brennan handed Whitfield an envelope. Thick, obviously cash. Whitfield opened it, thumbed through the contents, nodded. Words exchanged, too quiet to hear, then a handshake that looked like a business deal because that's exactly what it was. Corruption as transaction, filmed and saved. The video cut to 3 weeks later, same construction site, now active, workers moving like ants. Roy's voice again. Whitfield passed the inspection. Foundation was poured wrong, structural supports inadequate. Building shouldn't exist. But Brennan saved $40,000 in materials, and Whitfield got $10,000 for looking the other way. Then a final cut. News footage, handheld and shaky. Whitfield's car wrapped around a telephone pole, emergency lights painting everything red and blue. Roy's voice, quieter now, hollowed out. Thomas Whitfield died 3 days after I gave Brennan a copy of this footage. I told myself it was a warning, that Brennan would back off if he knew I had evidence. I was wrong. I got a man killed. The video ended. Bobby's breathing had gone shallow. Jack felt his own chest tight, rage building like pressure in a sealed container. This was what his father had died for. This was what Roy had run from. Not just evidence of bribery, but proof that exposing Brennan's crimes came with a death sentence. How many more? Bobby asked, voice barely above a whisper. Jack scrolled through the files. 11 videos, 11 instances of documented corruption. And among them one labeled simply, Michael Foster, the fourth brother. He clicked it. Same poor quality, same telephoto distance. But the scene was residential this time. A modest house with good bones and careful landscaping. The kind of home a man built when he cared about craft more than profit. The timestamp read November 2012, 3 weeks before Michael Foster's death. Roy's narration started immediately, tense in a way the earlier recordings hadn't been. Mike's been asking questions about the Riverside condo's wiring. Says it's not up to code. Says he's going to report it formally. I tried to warn him off, tried to tell him what Brennan's capable of, but Mike's stubborn. Says some things are worth the risk. The video showed Brennan's Mercedes pulling up to Foster's house. Brennan getting out, alone, carrying nothing but his phone. He went to the door, was admitted. 15 minutes of nothing, just an empty driveway and the slow creep of autumn shadows. Then Brennan emerged, got in his car, drove away. Roy's voice came back, shaking now. I couldn't get close enough to hear what they said, but 2 weeks later, Mike called me, said Brennan had threatened his family, said he was backing off the wiring complaint, said he was scared. Cut to news footage. Foster's house engulfed in flames, fire department spraying water that looked useless against the inferno. Roy's voice over the images, broken in a way that physical wounds never quite managed. The fire marshal said faulty wiring. Mike Foster, who'd been an electrician for 40 years, died because of faulty wiring in his own house. And I knew, God help me, I knew what had happened, and I said nothing. The video cut to black, but audio continued. Roy's voice in darkness, confession without absolution. I'm a coward. I let them kill Mike because I was afraid they'd kill me next, afraid they'd hurt Bobby. So I kept quiet, and I kept filming, and I told myself I was gathering evidence, when really I was just watching good men die and doing nothing to stop it. Static, then one final line. If you're seeing this, it means Daniel's dead too. And I'm sorry, I'm so goddamn sorry. The laptop screen went dark. The kitchen felt smaller than it had a moment ago, walls pressing in with the weight of ghosts and guilt. Bobby stood abruptly, chair scraping, and walked to the sink, hands braced on the counter, shoulders shaking with silent fury. Moose moved to him, hand on the young man's shoulder, solid and steady, not speaking, just present, the way you were for brothers when words failed. Jack ejected the drive, slipped it into his pocket. This is what we needed, he said, proof. Documentation. A trail so clear even corrupt cops can't ignore it. My father watched people die, Bobby said, not turning from the window. He had evidence and he did nothing. He did what he could, Moose said quietly. Man's got a family. He makes different calculations than a man alone. You think that makes him weak, but it makes him human. And in the end, he made sure the evidence survived, made sure someone could use it. Jack stood. Your father spent 3 years in hiding, keeping this safe, waiting for the right moment. He's not a coward, Bobby. He's a soldier who went to ground when retreat was the only tactical option. Now we use what he gave us. We finish the mission. The younger man turned, eyes red but clear. What's the plan? We need more than videos, Jack said. We need current evidence. Active crimes. Something that ties Brennan to ongoing criminal activity, not just historical corruption. The videos prove pattern, but we need present tense proof. Moose nodded. Tom Granger's been trying to build that case for 2 years. Maybe it's time we compared notes. And Sarah Chen, Jack said, if Brennan's still cutting corners on construction, she'll know where to look. Bobby wiped his face. When do we start? Now, Jack said, because Brennan's not going to wait for us to get organized. He made his opening move with the fake debt. When that doesn't work, he'll escalate. We need to be ready before that happens. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof like suppressing fire. Atlas stood, shook, moved to the door, ready to work, ready to hunt. Jack pulled on his coat, felt the weight of the USB drive in his pocket like a promise he intended to keep. They had the evidence. Now they needed the allies. And time was a resource they were running out of faster than any of them wanted to admit. Sheriff Tom Granger's office was on the second floor of the Pine Harbor Municipal Building, a brick structure that had probably looked impressive in 1950 and now just looked tired. Jack climbed stairs that needed replacing, past walls that needed paint, and thought about how infrastructure decay was its own kind of evidence. When a town stopped maintaining the basics, it meant money was going somewhere else, usually into pockets that were already full. Tom's door was open, the man himself visible through the gap, bent over paperwork, reading glasses perched on a nose that had been broken at least twice. He looked up when Jack knocked, and the recognition was immediate, followed by something that looked like relief. "Jack Hartwell," Tom said, standing, extending a hand over a desk buried in files and coffee rings. "Heard you were back in town, was hoping you'd come see me before you did something that put you in a cell downstairs." Jack shook, and Tom's grip was firm, honest, the handshake of someone who'd spent 30 years serving a community that didn't always deserve it, not planning on ending up in a cell. "Good," Tom said, "because Marcus Brennan's already called me twice asking about property rights and inheritance law. Man's circling your land like a shark that smelled blood. You rattle his cage yet?" "Just by existing," Jack said. He showed up day one with fake debt papers and a friendly threat. Standard intimidation playbook. Tom gestured to a chair, waited until Jack sat before settling back into his own. "Your father tried to warn me about Brennan 5 years ago. Came in with suspicions about the Foster fire, about Whitfield's accident. I listened, but I couldn't move on it. No evidence, no witnesses willing to talk, and half my department on Brennan's Christmas card list." "That's changed," Jack said. He pulled out the USB drive, set it on the desk between them like laying down a royal flush. Roy Cassidy's insurance policy. 11 documented instances of bribery, fraud, and evidence suggesting Brennan's been eliminating anyone who gets too close to his operation. Tom's eyes went wide and he reached for the drive, stopped himself. "Roy Cassidy's been dead 3 years. "Roy Cassidy's been in hiding 3 years, Jack corrected. "Big difference. He faked his death to escape Brennan, kept the evidence safe, and sent it through a back channel after my father died." The sheriff sat back, processing. "If this is what I think it is, it's enough for warrants. Multiple warrants. Federal involvement, probably. But Brennan's got lawyers on a retainer that charge more per hour than I make in a week. He'll tie this up in court for years." "Not if we catch him in an act of crime," Jack said. "Your case, the one you've been building for 2 years, what's missing?" Tom pulled a file from his desk, thick with frustration and dead ends. "Brennan's running a development project on the North Shore. Marina, condos, resort complex, $50 million investment. But the environmental permits are questionable. The construction timeline's been rushed. And I've got reports from commercial fishermen that the pilings are disturbing protected spawning grounds. So shut it down." "I've tried," Tom said. "State Environmental Board is involved. Federal EPA oversight, the whole alphabet soup. Every time I push, I get pushed back by officials who owe Brennan favors. He's been building a network for 20 years, Jack. He's not just corrupted Pine Harbor. He's corrupted the entire oversight structure." "Then we go around them," Jack said. "We document violations ourselves. We build a case so airtight that when it lands on a judge's desk, there's no room for interpretation. And we do it fast, before Brennan knows what we're collecting." Tom leaned forward. "You're talking about an investigation that would normally take months, multiple agencies, specialized knowledge, legal expertise. I don't have." Jack smiled. "I've got a combat engineer who knows construction, a Marine who knows how to follow orders, and a Vietnam vet who's forgotten more about tactical planning than most people learn. What I need from you is legal cover. Make what we're doing official enough that it doesn't get thrown out of court." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You're asking me to bend rules. I'm asking you to enforce laws everyone else is ignoring," Jack said. "There's a difference." Tom's jaw worked. Then he nodded. "There's someone you need to meet, engineer named Sarah Chen. Your father brought her in on this 2 years ago. She's been documenting Brennan's violations on her own time, unpaid, because she believes in doing the right thing even when it costs her. Can she be trusted?" "She's turned down 3 bribes and survived 2 attempts to destroy her reputation," Tom said. If anyone in this town can't be bought, it's Sarah Chen. Then let's go talk to her. Sarah Chen's office was a converted garage behind a house on Elm Street, the kind of space that announced its owner valued function over appearance. Drafting tables, computer monitors showing keyad drawings, filing cabinets labeled with the precision of someone who knew exactly where everything lived. The woman herself was 45, slim, efficient, with short black hair going gray at the temples and eyes that assessed Jack the moment he walked in with the kind of analytical intensity engineers brought to load-bearing calculations. "Sheriff," she said, nodding to Tom, then to Jack. "You're Daniel Hartwell's son. You look like him." "People keep saying that," Jack said. "Take it as a compliment," Sarah said. "Your father was one of the good ones." She gestured to chairs that looked like they'd been salvaged from a school auction. "Sit. Tell me what you need." Jack sat, Atlas settling beside him. "Information, evidence, everything you know about Marcus Brennan's construction projects and where they violate code." Sarah smiled, thin and dangerous. "That's a long list. You want the summary or the comprehensive breakdown?" "Start with the Marina project," Tom said, "the one on the North Shore." She pulled a file, laid out blueprints marked with red annotations. "The Crystal Harbor Marina and Resort Complex," Sarah said. $50 million, 300 boat slips, 200 condo units, commercial retail space. Approved 14 months ago with environmental waivers that shouldn't have been granted. Why not? "Because the shoreline they're building on is critical habitat for native fish populations," Sarah said. "The pilings they're driving disrupt spawning grounds. The runoff from the marina will introduce chemicals into water that feeds into Clearwater Lake. And the permits were fast-tracked through a state review process that normally takes 2 years. How'd Brennan manage that?" "Money," Sarah said simply. "Campaign donations to the right people. Consultants hired from firms owned by regulators' family members. The usual corruption playbook. It's not even subtle if you know where to look." "Can you prove it?" "I've got documentation," Sarah said. "Emails, financial records from public filings, engineering reports that were buried or modified. But it's circumstantial, suggestive, not conclusive." "What would make it conclusive?" Jack asked. "Proof of active violations," Sarah said. "If we could show that Brennan's current construction is failing to meet the standards outlined in his permits, that the work being done right now is substandard or dangerous, that would trigger immediate regulatory response. Inspectors would have to act, regardless of political pressure." "Can we get that proof?" Sarah's expression went careful. "We'd need access to the construction site, current photographs, soil samples, structural measurements. Essentially, we'd need to conduct an inspection without authority to do so." Jack glanced at Tom. "How illegal are we talking?" "Trespassing," the sheriff petitioned. "Maybe criminal mischief if you're caught doing anything that could be construed as interference with a permitted project." "And if we're not caught?" Tom's lips quirked. "Then it's just trespassing. And I might be slow to respond to that call if it came in after midnight on a rainy Tuesday when most of my deputies are busy elsewhere." Sarah looked between them. "You're planning to infiltrate an active construction site." "We're planning to document code violations," Jack said, "in service of an ongoing criminal investigation." "I'm an engineer, not a commando," Sarah said. "You don't need to be," Jack told her. "You just need to tell us what to photograph, what samples to collect, what measurements matter. We'll do the field work. And if security catches you, we won't get caught," Jack said with the calm certainty of someone who'd infiltrated compounds in countries where getting caught meant dying screaming. "We've had practice." Sarah sat back, studying him, then studying Tom, then looking at her files like they might tell her if this was the stupidest thing she'd ever agreed to. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but I'm coming with you." "No," Jack said immediately. "I'm the only one who knows what you're looking for," Sarah countered. "You could take 1,000 photographs and miss the critical detail because you don't have an engineer's eye. You want proof that will stand up in court? You need me there to collect it." Jack looked at Tom, who shrugged. "She's not wrong, and she's an adult who can make her own choices." Atlas whined softly, and Jack knew the dog was right. This was a bad idea, but bad ideas were sometimes the only ideas that worked. "Fine," he said, "but we do this my way. Military operation, full tactical planning. Everyone follows orders without question. This isn't a democracy once we're in the field." "Understood," Sarah said. Tom stood. "I'll make sure patrol schedules keep deputies away from the North Shore tomorrow night. After that, you're on your own." "That's all we need," Jack said. They left Sarah's office as the rain finally broke, clouds parting to reveal a sky scrubbed clean and heartbreakingly blue. Jack drove back to Clearwater Ridge with Atlas in the passenger seat, mind already running through operational planning. Infiltration routes, equipment needs, fallback positions, the familiar calculus of risk and reward that had kept him alive through 4 tours. Bobby was waiting on the porch when Jack pulled up, and the younger man's expression said something had happened. What? Brennan sent someone into my apartment, Bobby said. Didn't break in, just left a note on my door. Said I should reconsider my associations before I get hurt. Jack felt his jaw tighten. He's establishing surveillance, knows we've made contact. There's more, Bobby said. I asked around town, quiet-like. Brennan's hired extra security for the marina site. 4 men, ex-military contractors. The kind you hire when you're expecting trouble. Good, Jack said. Means we're making him nervous. Or means he's preparing to make us dead, Bobby countered. Moose emerged from inside, holding a phone. Tom just called. Said Brennan's filed a civil suit against you, Jack, trying to force sale of Clearwater Ridge through the courts. Hearing set for 2 weeks from now. Jack smiled without humor. Man's playing every angle, legal pressure, physical intimidation, timeline acceleration. He knows we're building something, and he's trying to force us into mistakes. Is it working? Bobby asked. Jack looked at the younger man, at Moose, at the farm his father had died protecting, and felt something settle in his chest. The same feeling he'd had before every major operation. Not fear, not excitement, just clarity. No, he said, it's giving us a deadline. We've got 2 weeks to build an unbeatable case. Tomorrow night we hit the construction site. Get proof of violations, lock down evidence that can't be ignored. And if Brennan's security catches us, Moose asked, then we deal with it, Jack said. Same way we've dealt with every other obstacle. We adapt, we overcome, we complete the mission. Atlas barked once, sharp and definitive, and padded to the truck bed where Jack had started assembling gear. The dog knew the rhythm of preparation, the cadence of getting ready for combat, and if a dog could be eager for a fight, Atlas was eager now. They spent the rest of the day planning. Moose pulling maps, highlighting approaches and exits. Bobby checking equipment, the muscle memory of pre-deployment inspections kicking in automatic. Sarah arriving with a list of specific violations to document, her engineering precision translating into tactical objectives. Jack watched his team work and saw what his father must have seen in Korea. Not just individuals, but a unit forming, bonds strengthening under pressure, the transformation of strangers into brothers through shared purpose. When night fell, they gathered in the bunker, huddled around the tactical map like generals plotting a campaign. The marina site was lit like a stadium, security contractors rotating in predictable patterns, cameras covering obvious approaches. But there were always gaps, always shadows, always ways in if you were willing to take the risk. We go in at 0200, Jack said. Sarah and I will handle the documentation. Bobby, you're Overwatch, high ground with a radio, eyes on security movements. Moose, your communications and extraction, engine running, ready to pull us out if it goes wrong. And Atlas, Bobby asked? Early warning system, Jack said. If someone's coming we don't see, he'll know before we do. The dog's tail thumped once against the floor. Agreement, understanding. The compact between handler and animal that transcended language. They reviewed the plan twice more, then sat in silence, each lost in their own pre-mission rituals. Moose cleaned a pistol he probably shouldn't have had, but definitely knew how to use. Bobby checked his watch compulsively. Sarah studied her engineering notes like they were scripture. And Jack sat with Atlas, hand on the dog's head, breathing steady, finding the calm center that made everything else possible. At 1:30, they loaded into Moose's truck, an ancient Ford that ran quiet despite looking like it should have been scrapped a decade ago. The drive to the North Shore took 20 minutes, every mile taking them deeper into commitment. There was still time to turn back, still time to choose the safe path. None of them suggested it. Moose parked a quarter-mile from the site, engine idling low. Bobby slipped out first, moving toward the tree line with his rifle case, becoming shadow among shadows. Sarah followed Jack, stepping where he stepped, breathing when he breathed, learning the rhythm of tactical movement through immersion. Atlas ranged ahead, nose down, reading the night. No signs of human presence yet, just wind and water and the distant hum of generators powering work lights. They reached the perimeter fence, chain link topped with cameras and warning signs. Jack pulled wire cutters from his pack, worked quickly, creating an access point that would close behind them. Threw low, moving toward the skeleton of buildings rising against the star-filled sky. The construction site was a maze of half-finished structures, equipment, and materials. Sarah led them to the marina pilings first, pulling out a tablet, photographing angles and measurements. Jack kept watch, counting seconds, aware of security patterns Bobby had radioed from his overwatch position. 2 minutes, clear. Sarah collected water samples from runoff channels, scraped paint chips from improperly treated steel. Every movement efficient, professional, the engineer's mind working even under pressure. Jack found himself impressed despite the circumstances. Moving to the condo foundation, Bobby's voice crackled. 2 guards, southern approach, 3 minutes out. Jack touched Sarah's shoulder, gestured to cover. They pressed against a concrete form, barely breathing, watching flashlight beams sweep past 20 feet away. The guards were talking, casual, not expecting trouble. They passed. Clear, Bobby confirmed. Sarah moved to the foundation, ran a hand along concrete that should have cured weeks ago. This is wrong, she whispered. The mixture's substandard. You can feel it. Too much aggregate, not enough cement. This will crack under load. Can you approve it? She pulled out a core sampler, extracted a plug of concrete. This will. Lab analysis will show exact composition. It'll be undeniable. Atlas growled, low and controlled. Jack's head snapped up. Bobby's voice confirmed the dog's warning. 4 guards converging on your position. They know you're there. The tactical situation collapsed into binary simplicity. Fight or flight, stand or run. Jack grabbed Sarah's arm. Move now! They ran, not toward the exit, but deeper into the site, using the maze of construction to break line of sight. Behind them, shouts, flashlights, the thud of boots on dirt. Atlas stayed close, ready to engage if needed, but Jack whistled him back. No contact. Not yet. Bobby's voice, calm under pressure. East corridor loading dock. 30 seconds, you'll have a gap. Jack pulled Sarah toward the coordinates, trusting his spotter's eyes. They burst through a gap between buildings just as security reached their last position. 15 seconds. 10. The fence, cut hours ago, laid open like an invitation. Through Atlas last, and then they were in the trees, moving fast but controlled, letting darkness swallow them. Moose's truck appeared exactly where it should have been. They piled in, Bobby materializing from shadows, and Moose drove away at legal speeds, just another truck on a back road in the middle of the night. No one spoke for 5 miles. Then Sarah started laughing, breathless and slightly hysterical. That was insane. That was Tuesday, Jack said. We got what we needed? Moose asked. Sarah held up the sample case. Enough to shut down the project and trigger a full state investigation. Combined with the financial evidence and Roy's videos, this is checkmate. Bobby shook his head, grinning despite himself. You people are crazy. Crazy would be letting Brennan win, Jack said. This is just determined. Atlas barked once, celebratory, and the truck filled with the kind of laughter that came after surviving something that should have killed you. The brotherhood of shared danger. The bond of completed missions. But Jack's mind was already moving to the next phase. They had the evidence. Now they had to protect it long enough to use it. And Marcus Brennan, when he discovered what they'd done, would respond with everything he had. The war had just entered its active phase. And wars, Jack knew better than anyone, were won not in single battles, but in the long campaign of attrition and will. They had will, they had brothers, and they had proof. Now they just had to survive long enough to deliver it. The retaliation came faster than Jack expected, which meant Brennan was either desperate or had been planning contingencies all along. Probably both. Men who built empires on bodies and bribes didn't survive 2 decades without learning to move quickly when threatened. It started with fire. Jack woke to Atlas barking, the sound frantic in a way the dog never was. The kind of alarm that bypassed conscious thought and went straight to combat instinct. He was out of bed and moving before his eyes fully opened, hand reaching for the sidearm that wasn't there because he was retired now, just a civilian in a farmhouse that suddenly smelled like smoke. The barn was burning, not the careful, controlled burn of a bonfire or brush clearing. This was rage made visible. Flames climbing the old wood like they'd been invited, like something accelerant. Fed had given them permission to devour everything Daniel Hartwell had built. The structure was already half consumed, roof caving in sections. sending sparks spiraling into the pre-dawn darkness like angry stars. Jack ran toward it anyway, some instinct to save what could be saved. But Atlas cut him off, body blocking, teeth gently but firmly on Jack's wrist. The dog's message was clear. Too late, too dangerous. Let it go. He was right. The barn was already lost, and standing closer just meant risking everything else. Jack pulled out his phone, called Tom Granger, then stood in his yard watching his father's last standing outbuilding collapse into itself with the sound of a giant breaking bones. The fire department arrived 20 minutes later, by which point there was nothing left to save, just embers to contain and questions to ask that everyone knew the answers to but couldn't prove. The fire chief, a thick man in his 50s with a face that had seen too many suspicious fires, walked the perimeter with a flashlight, stopping at the char patterns that told stories to those who knew the language. Accelerant, he said to Tom, who'd arrived 5 minutes behind the trucks. Multiple points of origin. This wasn't accidental. Can you prove arson? Tom asked. The chief shrugged. I can write it up as suspicious, but without witnesses or physical evidence of the device, it's just professional opinion. Insurance company will care. Prosecutor probably won't. Jack stood apart, arms crossed, watching the smoking ruin and doing the math. The barn had held tools, equipment, memories. None of it critical to the mission, but that wasn't the point. The point was the message. I can reach you. I can hurt you. I can destroy what you love. Marcus Brennan had just declared open warfare. Bobby arrived as the fire trucks were packing up, trucks skidding to a stop, the young man jumping out before the engine fully died. He took in the destruction, jaw tight, then turned to Jack. This is my fault. He knows I'm helping you. This was always going to happen, Jack said. Brennan doesn't negotiate or retreat. He escalates until the other side breaks. We knew that going in. So what do? We don't break, Jack said simply. Tom walked over, face grim. I can't protect you, Jack. Not officially. Brennan's got enough political cover that anything I do looks like harassment. You file a complaint, it goes into a stack of paperwork that won't get looked at for months. I'm not asking for protection, Jack said. I'm asking you to be ready when we hand you evidence so solid he can't talk his way out. Tom glanced at the barn ruins. How close are you? Sarah's analyzing the samples, Jack said. Roy's videos are being digitally authenticated by a forensics expert Bobby knows from his service days. We're building the case piece by piece. Another week, maybe 2. You might not have 2 weeks, Tom said. This, he gestured at the smoking wreckage, is just the opening move. Brennan's going to keep pushing until you fold or fight back in a way that gives him legal leverage. Then we finish faster, Jack said. The sheriff left. The fire trucks left. The sun came up on a property that looked even more abandoned than it had when Jack first arrived, and he stood in the growing light feeling the weight of inheritance in a new way. His father had stood here, had watched the same sunrise, had fought the same enemy, and lost. Jack didn't plan on losing. He went down to the bunker, Atlas following, and pulled up the files they'd collected. Sarah's engineering reports, Roy's videos, the financial documents, photos from the marina raid. It was compelling, comprehensive, damning. But was it enough? His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. We need to meet. Alone. Tonight. The old lighthouse point. Come unarmed. This is not a threat. This is a lifeline. The message was unsigned, but Jack had been in the intelligence game long enough to recognize a careful approach when he saw one. He showed it to Bobby when the younger man came down to check on him. Could be a trap, Bobby said immediately. Probably is, Jack agreed. But it's also the first communication we've received that isn't an overt threat. Someone wants to talk. Either it's Brennan trying to negotiate, or it's someone in his organization looking to flip. Or it's an ambush designed to eliminate you away from witnesses, Bobby said. That's why you and Moose are going to be watching from 300 yards out with night vision and long rifles, Jack said. I go in alone like they asked, but I'm not unsupported. And if it goes wrong, then you extract me and we go to war, Jack said. But I don't think it will. Whoever sent this knows too much about operational security to be sloppy about an assassination. This feels like someone reaching out. Atlas whined and Jack scratched the dog's ears. You don't like it either, huh? Smart dog. The day crawled past with the weight of anticipation. Sarah called with preliminary results from the concrete samples. Substandard across the board, she said. This isn't cutting corners. This is criminal negligence. If those buildings ever see full occupancy, they'll fail. Maybe not immediately, but catastrophically and eventually. Can you testify to that? Jack asked. In court, under oath, with my professional reputation on the line, Sarah said. This is exactly the kind of evidence your father was looking for. Irrefutable, technical, the kind prosecutors love because juries understand it. Good, Jack said. Package it up. Make it bulletproof. Already done, Sarah said. I've sent copies to 3 different locations. Cloud backup, physical drives, the works. If something happens to the original, we've got redundancy. Smart, Jack said. Your father taught me that, Sarah said quietly. Told me that in a fight against people with unlimited resources, your only advantage is being more careful than they are ruthless. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. His father's wisdom, passed down through people Jack had never known, Daniel Hartwell had touched. How many others were out there carrying pieces of the man Jack had never fully known? After they hung up, Jack spent an hour cleaning his father's old service pistol, a 1911 that had probably seen Korea and certainly seen decades of careful maintenance. He didn't plan to bring it to the meeting, but having it ready felt right. Preparation as prayer. Moose arrived at sunset, Bobby 10 minutes later, both men carrying rifle cases and the quiet intensity of soldiers preparing for contact. They reviewed the plan 3 times. Synchronized watches, established radio protocols, and fallback positions. It felt like a deployment briefing, familiar and strangely comforting. At 2200 hours, they drove to the lighthouse point in separate vehicles, Moose and Bobby peeling off a mile out to establish overwatch while Jack continued alone. The lighthouse had been decommissioned 30 years ago, the tower dark, the keeper's house collapsed into itself. But the point of land it sat on commanded a view of the entire southern approach, which made it tactically valuable and symbolically appropriate. Jack parked, killed the engine, and sat for a moment listening to the night. Waves against rocks, wind through the ruins, Atlas beside him, alert but not alarmed. No immediate threats, but the night was young. He got out, walked toward the lighthouse, stopped at the base where moonlight painted everything silver, and shadow waited. Professional patience learned from 1,000 stakeouts in 100 countries. A figure emerged from the darkness on the ocean side, moving carefully, hands visible, body language broadcasting, peaceful intent, from 50 yards out. As the distance closed, Jack's heart kicked hard enough to hurt. Roy Cassidy looked like a ghost that had been living rough. 62 years old and weathered down to something essential and hard. Beard gone gray and wild, clothes that had seen too many days without washing, eyes that carried the weight of 3 years in hiding. But alive. Undeniably, impossibly alive. They stood facing each other, 2 men separated by blood and choice and the wreckage of good intentions, neither quite knowing how to start. Roy broke first. You look like your father, he said, voice rough from disuse or emotion or both. People keep telling me that, Jack said. It's true, not just the face, the way you stand. Like you're ready for the fight but hoping it doesn't come. Jack said nothing, let the silence work. Roy looked away, toward the black water. I sent the USB drive. Don't know if you got it. I got it, Jack said. Watched every video, read every file. You documented everything. Not everything, Roy said. I missed the important parts. The parts where I could have stopped him and didn't. The parts where being a coward looked like being careful. You protected your son, Jack said. That's not cowardice. I abandoned my son, Roy corrected. Let him think I was dead. Let him grieve. Because I was too scared to face Brennan and too ashamed to face Bobby. You want to call that protection? Go ahead. I call it failure. The wind picked up, carrying salt and the smell of seaweed. Jack studied the man in front of him, seeing the fractures and the attempt to hold them together. Why contact me now? Because Brennan knows you raided his construction site, Roy said. He's planning something, not just another warning like the barn, something final. He's hired contractors, ex-military, the kind who don't ask questions and don't leave witnesses. When? Soon, Roy said. Days, maybe hours. He's moving up his timeline because you're moving faster than he expected. The lawsuit, the fires, all of that is just distraction. What he's really doing is preparing to eliminate everyone who can testify against him, including you. Especially me, Roy said. I'm the one who knows where the bodies are buried. Literally. Thomas Whitfield's wasn't a car accident. Brennan had him killed. Body dumped in the quarry off Route 9. Mike Foster didn't die in a fire. He was already dead when the house burned. Your father, Roy's voice broke. Daniel didn't have a heart attack. He was poisoned. Slow acting, untraceable unless you're looking for it. I have proof of all of it, but if I come forward, I'm dead within a week. Then we bring you in protected, Jack said. Federal witness protection, full immunity in exchange for testimony. Roy laughed, bitter. You think that matters? Brennan's got reach beyond Maine. Money buys reach. I go into protection. I'm just delaying the inevitable. So what are you suggesting? We end this now, Roy said. Not through courts and lawyers and a justice system. Brennan's already corrupted. We end it the way soldiers end threats. Quick, permanent, final. Jack felt ice in his gut. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice, Roy said. You think testifying matters? You think evidence matters? I've watched Brennan kill 4 men and walk away clean every time. The system doesn't work for people like us. It works for people like him. That's not true, Jack said. Isn't it? Roy stepped closer, eyes fierce. Your father believed in the system. Spent 5 years building a case, following rules, documenting everything legally. And where did it get him? Poisoned in his own kitchen, death ruled natural, case never opened. You want to honor Daniel's memory? Don't repeat his mistakes. Jack's radio crackled softly, Bobby's voice barely a whisper. Movement. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Armed personnel. Estimate 12 hostiles. Roy heard it too, face going pale. He found me. God damn it, he found me. Jack keyed the radio. Fall back to secondary positions. Do not engage without my signal. Copy, Bobby said. Roy was already moving toward the tree line, instinct overriding everything else. Jack grabbed his arm. You run now. You're running forever. Stand with me. Let's end this together. The older man stopped, turned, and for a moment Jack saw his father's best friend instead of a broken fugitive. You can't fight 12 men. I've fought worse odds, Jack said, and I'm not alone. The vehicles came fast, headlights cutting through darkness, surrounding the lighthouse point in a tactical formation that spoke of professional training. Doors open, men emerged, not police, not security guards, contractors, the kind you hired when you needed deniability and didn't care about collateral damage. They spread out, weapons visible, moving with the confidence of overwhelming force. And from the lead vehicle, Marcus Brennan stepped out, expensive coat over expensive suit, looking like a man attending a business meeting instead of an execution. Jack Hartwell, Brennan called across the distance. You're trespassing on private property. This lighthouse point was purchased by my company 6 months ago. You need to leave. Or what? Jack said. Or my security team will remove you, Brennan said. For your own safety, of course. These ruins are structurally unsound. Accidents happen. Roy stepped out from behind Jack, and Brennan's composure cracked. Just a flicker, there and gone. But Jack saw it, saw the recognition and the calculation and the cold decision being made. Roy Cassidy, Brennan said. I thought you were dead. You thought wrong, Roy said. Brennan smiled. Well, this simplifies things. 2 problems, 1 solution. Gentlemen, he addressed his contractors. These men are trespassing and have refused to leave. Remove them, use appropriate force. The contractors advanced. Jack counted 12, just as Bobby had estimated, armed with pistols and submission tactics. Professional, experienced, dangerous, but not invincible. Jack keyed his radio. Execute. 2 things happened simultaneously. Moose's truck roared to life from its concealed position, high beams flooding the area, blinding the contractors. And Bobby's rifle spoke once from 300 yards, the round smashing the lead vehicle's engine block, disabling it with precision that spoke of a sniper's training. The contractors scattered, reaching for weapons, tactical discipline fracturing under unexpected resistance. Jack used the chaos, closing with the nearest man, disarming him with movements drilled into muscle memory over 26 years. The pistol clattered away. The contractor went down hard. Roy moved too, slower but determined, grappling with another contractor who'd gotten too close. The 2 men crashed into the lighthouse wall, age and desperation against youth and training. Atlas appeared from nowhere, a gray ghost with teeth, hitting another contractor at a full sprint, dragging the man down with the kind of controlled aggression that came from years of military work. The dog didn't maim, just immobilized, holding the man pinned until he stopped struggling. Bobby's rifle spoke again, this time taking out a tire on the second vehicle. Warning shots, suppressing fire, keeping the opposition off balance. Tom Granger's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by a bullhorn. Sheriff's Department, everyone on the ground, now! Floodlights hit from the road. Multiple patrol cars, deputies fanning out with weapons drawn. The contractors, caught between Jack's team and law enforcement, made the smart choice. Hands up, weapons down, compliance. But Brennan ran, straight toward the lighthouse, moving fast for a man in his 40s. Desperation overriding common sense. Jack pursued, leaving Atlas to guard the contractors, focusing everything on the man who'd killed his father. The lighthouse interior was treacherous. Floor rotted through, stairs barely holding their own weight. Brennan climbed anyway, Jack following, both men ascending into darkness. At the top, the old lens room opened onto empty air, where glass had been, wind howling through like the ghosts of drowned sailors. Brennan turned, backed against the railing, and for the first time Jack saw real fear in his eyes. "You can't win this," Brennan said. "I have lawyers, resources, connections. Even if you arrest me tonight, I'll be out by morning." "Maybe," Jack said, "but you'll be arrested, charged, your operation exposed. Your contractors are already talking, making deals. Roy's alive to testify. We have evidence of every crime you've committed for 20 years. Your empire is over, Marcus. Accept it." The older man's face twisted. "Your father thought that too. Thought evidence mattered. Thought justice existed. Look where it got him." "It got him a son willing to finish what he started," Jack said. "That's more legacy than you'll ever have." Brennan's hand moved toward his pocket. Jack tensed, ready for a weapon, but what emerged was a phone. "One call," Brennan said. "One call and your entire team is compromised. I have files on all of you, leverage, blackmail material. I've been in this business too long to not have insurance." "Then make the call," Jack said. "See what happens." Brennan's thumb hovered over the screen. The wind howled, the lighthouse swayed, and from below, Tom's voice carried up through the ruins. "Marcus Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, bribery, and arson. Come down peacefully." The phone slipped from Brennan's hand, tumbled over the edge, fell into darkness. The fight went out of him all at once, shoulders sagging, the weight of his choices finally too heavy to carry. Jack gestured toward the stairs. "After you." They descended in silence, Jack keeping distance, ready for a final desperate move that never came. At the bottom, Tom was waiting with handcuffs and a Miranda warning, doing everything by the book because the book mattered when you wanted convictions that stuck. Bobby approached as they led Brennan away, face unreadable. "Is it over?" "The arrest is just the beginning," Jack said. "But yeah, the hard part's over." Roy stood apart, watching his former friend being put into a patrol car, and the expression on his face was complicated. Relief, regret, the bitter satisfaction of seeing a threat neutralized at terrible cost. Jack walked to him. "You did the right thing." Coming forward, standing witness. Roy shook his head. "I did the only thing left." "There's a difference." Bobby appeared beside them, and Roy went still. Father and son, 3 feet apart, separated by years of lies and grief, and the impossible task of rebuilding trust from rubble. Bobby spoke first. "You're alive." "I'm alive," Roy confirmed. The younger man's hands clenched. "You let me think you were dead. 3 years, funerals, grief, moving on, and you were alive." "I was protecting you," Roy said. "No," Bobby said. "You were protecting yourself. From consequences. From having to face what you'd done. From being a father when it got hard." The words hit like bullets. Roy flinched but didn't retreat. "You're right. I was a coward. I am a coward. And I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm here now and I'll testify, and maybe that counts for something." Bobby stared at his father, emotions cycling too fast to track. Then slowly he extended his hand. Not an embrace, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. "It's a start." Roy took the hand, held it like a lifeline, and something in both men's faces shifted. Not healing, not yet, but the possibility of healing. The door cracked open instead of welded shut. Jack turned away, giving them privacy, and found Moose standing beside Tom's patrol car. The old Vietnam veteran nodded slowly. Daniel would be proud. "Would he?" Jack asked. Moose smiled. "You brought down the man who killed him. You protected this town. You built an army out of broken people and gave them purpose. Yeah, he'd be proud." Tom approached, expression serious. "There's something you need to know. something that came up during our investigation into Brennan's finances. Jack tensed. What? We found payments, Tom said. Large ones. Going to a retired judge, Harold Winslow. He presided over half the cases in this county for 30 years before stepping down 5 years ago. Bribes? Jack asked. Worse, Tom said. We think he was actively burying evidence, dismissing charges, protecting Brennan's operation from the bench. The Foster fire investigation. Winslow's son was the assigned detective. The Whitfield accident. Winslow fast-tracked the closure. Every time your father or anyone else got close to exposing Brennan, Winslow made it disappear legally. Jack felt his stomach drop. So even if we'd brought charges years ago, they would have been dismissed, Tom confirmed. Winslow was the firewall, the reason the system failed every time. We're building a case against him now, but it's complicated. Retired judges have protections. This is going to take time. Does his family know? Jack asked. Tom nodded. His daughter, Rebecca. She's the new district judge. Took over her father's seat 2 years ago. We're going to have to inform her. She might have to recuse herself from any Brennan-related proceedings. Or, a voice said from behind them, I can recuse myself right now and save everyone the awkwardness. They turned. A woman stood at the edge of the patrol car lights, mid-40s, dark suit, face that looked like it had been carved from granite and conscience. Rebecca Winslow carried herself with the weight of authority and the burden of knowing that authority had been corrupted. Judge Winslow, Tom said carefully. I've been listening to the scanner, she said, heard the arrest. Came to make sure it was real. She looked at Jack. Your father tried to bring evidence to my father 8 years ago about the Foster case. My father dismissed it, told him there was no basis for reopening the investigation. And you? Jack asked. I didn't know, Rebecca said. Not then. I believed my father when he said he was protecting the integrity of the court. But 3 months ago, I found his financial records, payments from shell corporations, meetings with Brennan, and I started asking questions. That's why Brennan accelerated, Tom said, realization dawning. He knew you were investigating your own father. Rebecca nodded. I've been building a case. Quietly, carefully, waiting for the right moment to act. And now she looked at Brennan in the patrol car. Now that moment's here. I'm recusing myself from all proceedings related to this case. I'm also filing a formal complaint against my father with the State Judicial Review Board, and I'm testifying about everything I found. The wind off the ocean carried the salt smell of honesty, rare and bracing. Jack studied her face, saw the cost of the choice she was making, the price of integrity when it meant destroying family legacy. Why, Jack asked. Because the law means nothing if judges can be bought, Rebecca said. Because my father spent 30 years on the bench and the last 5 of them were a lie. And because your father died trying to expose a truth that my father helped bury. The least I can do is make sure that truth finally sees daylight. She walked away, back straight, shoulders square, carrying the weight of righteousness and ruin in equal measure. Moose whistled low. That's going to shake this town to its foundation. Good, Jack said. Foundations need shaking sometimes. That's how you know if they're solid. Atlas trotted over, tail wagging, mission accomplished written in every line of his body. Jack knelt, buried his face in thick fur, and allowed himself one moment of weakness. Just one. Then he stood, shoulders square, and looked at the men and women who'd stood with him. Sarah had arrived, emerging from Tom's car where she'd apparently been reviewing evidence. The engineer looked fierce and satisfied. We got him. Yeah, Jack said, we did. The contractors were being loaded into transport vans, rights being read, futures being recalculated. Brennan sat in the back of Tom's cruiser, staring straight ahead, the weight of 20 years of crimes finally catching up. Tom approached Jack, hand extended. This is going to be a legal nightmare. Months of testimony, motions, appeals. You ready for that? I've got nothing but time, Jack said. The sheriff smiled. Good, because we're going to need you, all of you. The moon broke through clouds, painting everything silver. The lighthouse stood dark behind them, a monument to warnings unheeded and lights extinguished. But Jack thought maybe it didn't have to stay dark. Maybe some lights could be relit, some watches could be kept. His father had started a war against corruption. Tonight, that war had been won. Not through violence, though violence had threatened. Not through revenge, though revenge would have been easy. But through evidence and law and people choosing to stand together when standing alone would have been safer. Bobby and Roy were talking now, quiet words Jack couldn't hear, healing or trying to. The contractors were contained. Brennan was caught, the corrupt judge exposed. The evidence was secure. The mission was complete. Jack looked at Atlas, who looked back with eyes that understood everything that mattered. Good boy, Jack said. We did it. The dog's tail wagged once. Agreement, pride, the simple joy of a job well done. And somewhere, Jack thought, his father was watching, not haunting, not judging, just watching his son finish what he'd started, keeping the watch together across the gap between life and death. The night was cold but clear. The stars were out. And for the first time since coming home, Jack Hartwell felt like he belonged. Winter came to Pine Harbor the way it always did, sudden and uncompromising, turning the lake to iron and the trees to skeletal monuments against the sky the color of old steel. 3 months had passed since the arrest at the lighthouse, 3 months of depositions and legal maneuvering, and the slow grinding machinery of justice that made combat look efficient by comparison. Jack stood on the porch of Clearwater Ridge, coffee steaming in his hands, watching the first real snow of the season settle over land that felt less like inheritance and more like home with each passing day. Atlas lay at his feet, graying muzzle resting on paws, the dogs breathing steady and peaceful in a way that only came after the mission was truly complete. The trial had started 2 weeks ago. Marcus Brennan sat in a federal courthouse in Portland, facing 17 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, racketeering, and environmental crimes that carried sentences measured in decades. His lawyers were good, expensive, relentless, but they were fighting against something unstoppable. The truth, documented and verified and presented by witnesses who'd been waiting years to speak. Roy Cassidy had testified first, 3 days on the stand, laying out the entire conspiracy from its origins 15 years ago through the systematic elimination of anyone who threatened to expose it. The prosecutors had offered him immunity in exchange for cooperation, and Roy had taken it not because it guaranteed safety, but because silence had cost him everything already. Better to speak and risk dying than stay quiet and keep living as a ghost. Bobby had been in the courtroom every day, sitting in the front row where his father could see him, and the look that passed between them each morning was complicated. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something like understanding. The recognition that broken men could still choose to do right, even when right came too late to undo the wrong. Sarah Chen had testified about the construction violations, transforming complex engineering into language juries could understand. She'd brought models, photographs, structural analyses that showed not just corners being cut, but entire buildings designed to fail. 32 residential units occupied by families who had no idea they were living in time bombs. The prosecutor had called it criminal negligence. Sarah had called it attempted manslaughter with a 20-year fuse. Tom Granger had testified about the corruption within his own department, naming deputies who'd taken bribes, officials who'd looked away, a system that had been rotting from the inside for so long that good people had stopped believing change was possible. It had cost him. 3 deputies had resigned before they could be fired. The county council had called for his resignation. But Tom had stood firm, and somehow that mattered more than any conviction. Jack's testimony had been the shortest. They'd asked him about his father, about the bunker, about the evidence Daniel Hartwell had died collecting. He'd answered truthfully, keeping emotion out of his voice the way officers did when filing after action reports. The facts mattered. The feelings were his to carry. But when they'd asked him why he'd continued his father's investigation, Jack had allowed himself one moment of unfiltered honesty. Because some men spend their whole lives building things, and other men spend theirs tearing those things down. My father was a builder. Marcus Brennan is a destroyer, and I'll be damned if I let destroyers win just because builders die before they finish. The courtroom had gone silent. Even Brennan's lawyers had no cross-examination for that. Now, waiting for the verdict that everyone knew was coming, Jack found himself thinking less about the trial and more about what came after. Clearwater Ridge spread out before him, 80 acres of possibility that his father had protected and Jack had reclaimed. The barn was gone, burned to ash and memory, but the land remained. The lake remained. The woods and the shore, and the quiet spaces where men could come to remember who they were before the world tried to tell them different. He'd found his father's final plans in the bunker 2 weeks after the arrest, tucked in a folder labeled simply, "After." Architectural drawings for a renovation that would transform the farmhouse into a residential facility. Notes about programs for veterans dealing with PTSD, addiction, the invisible wounds that VA hospitals treated like bureaucratic inconveniences instead of life-threatening emergencies. Budget estimates, grant applications, a vision of Clearwater Ridge as a place where broken soldiers could learn to be whole men again. Daniel Hartwell had been planning this for years, setting aside money, drawing up specifications, preparing for a future he wouldn't live to see. And he'd left it all for Jack, the son he'd barely known, with a letter that made Jack's chest tight every time he read it. The letter sat on this kitchen table now, creased from handling, the handwriting shakier than in the earlier documents, but still unmistakably his father's. Jack had memorized it, but sometimes the act of reading mattered more than the content. Son, it began, if you're reading this, I failed to finish what I started. That's on me. But failure isn't final unless no one picks up the torch. I'm hoping you'll pick it up. Not because you owe me anything. You don't. I was a terrible father and an absent husband, and I spent more time trying to save strangers than I did trying to save my own family. Your mother knew that, forgave it somehow. I never figured out how to forgive myself. But I learned something in Korea that I never managed to teach you. War doesn't end when you come home. It follows you, lives in your sleep and your silence, and the way you can't quite connect with people who haven't seen what you've seen. The VA calls it PTSD, like giving it a name makes it manageable. But it's not manageable, it's survivable. And survival takes community, takes men who understand, takes a place where being broken isn't weakness, it's just the price of service. I wanted to build that place. Clearwater Ridge is a sanctuary, a workshop where men could rebuild themselves the way they'd rebuild engines or furniture, piece by patient piece. I've got the plans, got some money set aside, got permits filed and contractors lined up. What I don't have is time. But you do. You've got the training, the experience, the heart that I never showed you I had. Build this, Jack. Not for me. For the men who'll come after you, the ones still fighting wars that ended years ago. Be the light they need when their own goes dark. I love you. Should have said it more. Should have said it at all. But I'm saying it now. You were the best thing I ever made. And I'm sorry I never learned how to tell you that when it mattered. The letter ended there, no signature. Like his father had run out of words or courage or time. Jack folded it carefully, slipped it back into his pocket, and made a decision he'd been circling for weeks. He was going to build it. The sanctuary, the workshop, the place where broken men could learn to be whole again, not because his father had asked, though that mattered, not because it would honor Daniel Hartwell's memory, though it would, but because Jack Hartwell, 52 years old and retired and still fighting wars in his sleep, needed that place as much as anyone. And he wasn't going to build it alone. Moose found him an hour later, the old Vietnam veteran's truck crunching up the driveway, parking in the same spot he'd parked 100 times when Daniel was alive. He climbed out slow, age showing in the careful way he moved, but his eyes were clear and his handshake was still iron. Jury's out, Moose said. Tom called. Said they've been deliberating for 3 hours. Lawyers think that's a good sign. For us or for Brennan? Jack asked. For justice, Moose said. However that shakes out. They walked the property together. 2 old soldiers making a patrol that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with the ritual of movement. Moose pointed out places where things could be built, where the land sloped right for foundations, where the trees would provide privacy and the lake would provide peace. Your daddy and I walked this same route about 5 years ago, Moose said. He was already planning then, knew what Brennan was, knew it was going to end badly, but he was planning for after anyway. That's the kind of man he was, always looking ahead, even when ahead looked dark. Did he ever talk about me? Jack asked. Every time I saw him, Moose said. Wondered how you were doing, what missions you were running, whether you were safe. Kept every news article about Air Force operations. Convinced himself you were involved even when you weren't. Proud doesn't cover it. Terrified is closer. Proud and terrified and unable to say either one because that's what our generation did. We felt things and buried them and wondered why we couldn't breathe. Jack stopped walking, looked at the lake, the ice forming in patterns like fractured glass. I wish I'd known him better. You know him now, Moose said. Through what he built, what he left behind, what he fought for. That's knowing someone deeper than Sunday dinners and small talk ever gets you. You know his character, his courage, his regrets. That's the real man, not the one who struggled with conversation. They stood in silence for a while, breath fogging, the cold clean and sharp. Then Moose spoke again, quieter. I'm in, whatever you're building here, I'm in. Got nothing but time and a pension that stretches further when you're not spending it on yourself. Put me to work. Jack looked at him. You sure? This is going to take years. Money, permits, fighting bureaucracy that makes military red tape look efficient. Son, I'm 73 years old, Moose said. I've been waiting 50 years for a mission that matters more than survival. This matters. I'm in. Bobby arrived as the sun was setting, truck loaded with lumber and tools, the young Marine having spent the afternoon preparing without being asked. He'd taken a leave of absence from his construction job, told Jack he wanted to help build something instead of just repairing what other people broke. There was healing in that choice, Jack knew. The beginning of purpose after years of drift. Roy was with him, and that was still strange to see. Father and son, working together, the silence between them less hostile and more careful. They were learning each other again, the way you learned a language you'd spoken as a child and forgotten as an adult. Familiar but foreign, painful but necessary. Sarah pulled up as they were unloading, her sedan looking small and practical next to the trucks. Her presence a reminder that not all the warriors carried rifles. She had blueprints, engineering assessments, cost projections. The architect of possibility, turning dreams into specifications. I talked to the county, she said without preamble, about rezoning permits, variance requirements. It's doable, but it's going to take time and money and probably a lawyer who specializes in nonprofit development. I know a guy, Tom said, appearing from his patrol car that had ghosted up the driveway. Used to do JAG work, retired now. Bored as hell. Mentioned your project to him, and he nearly broke his hip running to offer help. Pro bono, if you'll let him be involved. Jack looked at the people assembled in his yard, this collection of broken and healing and determined souls, and felt something shift in his chest. His father had fought alone for 5 years, but Jack wasn't alone. Would never be alone again if he didn't choose it. Let's build something, he said. The work began the next morning, despite the cold, despite the snow that fell in lazy spirals, despite every reasonable objection about weather and timing and common sense. They cleared the barn foundation, salvaging what could be salvaged, disposing of the rest. Bobby and Roy worked side by side, the younger man teaching the older about modern techniques, the older man remembering skills from decades past. It wasn't conversation, but it was communication. Moosin and Jack framed out what would become the main hall, a large open space designed for gatherings and meals, and the kind of community that happened when men stopped pretending they were fine and started admitting they were wounded. Sarah supervised, checking measurements, verifying structural integrity, turning rough carpentry into architecture that would last. Tom stopped by during his lunch breaks, helping when he could, updating them on the trial when he couldn't. The prosecution had rested. The defense was making its case, arguing that Brennan had been misled by subordinates, that he couldn't be held responsible for decisions made by contractors he had hired in good faith. It was desperate and unconvincing, but juries were unpredictable. 2 weeks into construction, the verdict came down. Guilty. 17 counts, unanimous on all charges. Tom called Jack personally, voice tight with emotion he was trying to hide. It's over. Brennan's looking at 40 years minimum before parole eligibility. The contractors flipped on him completely. Corroborated everything Roy testified to. Judge called it one of the most systematic corruption cases he'd seen in 30 years on the bench. Jack sat down on a sawdust-covered bench, phone pressed to his ear, and felt the weight he'd been carrying for 3 months suddenly lift. Not completely. Grief and loss didn't work that way. But lighter, manageable. The mission complete in a way that mattered. Thank you, Tom, he said. Thank Daniel, Tom said. This was his fight. You just finished it. After they hung up, Jack walked to the lake, Atlas following, and stood at the water's edge watching ice form in slow, creeping patterns. His father had stood here, had fought here, had died here, but the land didn't remember death. It remembered life. Remembered every person who'd loved it, protected it, refused to let it be destroyed for profit. The dog leaned against his leg, warm and solid, and Jack reached down to scratch behind graying ears. "We did it, boy. We actually did it." Atlas looked up with eyes that understood everything that mattered, and his tail wagged once. Agreement. Pride. The simple satisfaction of loyalty rewarded. The construction continued through winter, slower in the brutal cold but never stopping. More people joined, and as word spread, veterans from surrounding towns, men who'd served in Iraq and Afghanistan, in Vietnam and Korea, men who understood what Jack was building because they had been looking for it their whole lives without knowing it existed. A master sergeant named Williams showed up one frozen Tuesday, 70 years old and still built like the tank commander he'd been in Desert Storm. Said he'd heard about the project from Moose, wanted to help with plumbing since that had been his trade before the Army. Stayed for 6 weeks, working 12-hour days, refusing payment, sleeping in his camper in the driveway. A Navy corpsman named Martinez arrived with medical training and experience running treatment programs for veterans with addiction issues. She was 48, compact and competent, with eyes that had seen the worst of human damage and still believed in healing. She designed a wellness center, mapped out programs, started recruiting counselors who understood military culture. They came one by one and in small groups, drawn by something they couldn't always articulate: the chance to build instead of destroy, the opportunity to serve again, differently. The hope that maybe this place could be what they'd needed when they came home and found nothing waiting. By spring, the main building was finished. 12 bedrooms, each simple but dignified. A commercial kitchen designed for feeding 30. A common area with a fireplace big enough to warm bodies and souls. A library stocked with books about carpentry, mechanics, agriculture, all the skills men could learn when their hands needed work and their minds needed distraction. The wellness center followed, Martinez overseeing construction with the precision of someone who'd run field hospitals in Fallujah. Group therapy rooms, private counseling offices, a meditation space that faced the lake, all windows and light, and the kind of quiet that let men hear their own thoughts without drowning in them. And finally, the workshop, Jack's favorite part. A massive space filled with tools and benches and projects in various states of completion. Bobby taught woodworking. Roy, tentatively at first, and then with growing confidence, taught welding. Williams handled small engine repair. Others contributed what they knew, and the space became a classroom without lectures, a church without sermons, a place where healing happened through the simple act of making something useful with your hands. They named it the Hartwell Veterans Center. Not a hospital, not a shelter, a center. A place men came to not because they were broken beyond repair, but because they were repairable and needed the right tools. The grand opening happened on a Saturday in late May, the kind of spring morning that made Maine's brutal winters seem almost worth it. Warm sun, clear sky, the lake reflecting everything like a mirror. Over 200 people came, veterans, families, town officials who'd opposed the project initially and now wanted to claim they'd supported it all along. Jack stood at the front door with Atlas beside him, greeting people, accepting congratulations he didn't feel he'd earned. This was his father's vision. These were his father's plans. Jack had just been the one still breathing when it came time to build. But when he said that to Moose, the old veteran shook his head. Your daddy had the vision. You had the courage to make it real. Both matter. Neither works without the other. The ceremony was brief. Tom spoke about community and sacrifice. Sarah spoke about the engineering challenges and how many people had volunteered skills to make it possible. Martinez spoke about the programs they'd be offering, the lives they hoped to change, the mission that would never really be complete because broken soldiers would keep coming home as long as wars existed. Then Bobby stood up, unexpected, and the crowd quieted. The young Marine looked nervous, hands fidgeting with note cards he'd apparently prepared, but his voice was steady when he spoke. My father's here today, Bobby said. For a long time, I thought he was dead, grieved him, hated him for leaving. Then I found out he was alive, and I hated him for lying. Families break in a lot of ways. War breaks them, secrets break them. Sometimes just time and distance are enough. My family broke all those ways. He paused, looked at Roy sitting in the front row, something complicated passing between them. But this place, Bobby continued, is about putting broken things back together. Not perfectly. Nothing that breaks comes back perfect. but functionally, usefully, in ways that matter. My father and I are doing that, learning how to be family again. And if we can do it, maybe other people can too. That's what this center represents. Not fixing what's broken, just making it work again, making it matter again. The applause was quiet but sustained, and Roy stood, moved to his son, and they embraced. Not dramatically, just two men acknowledging the work it took to stand in the same room without flinching. Jack felt his eyes burn, looked away, found Sarah watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She'd been around more lately, helping with administrative setup, staying for dinners, laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny. Somewhere in the past 6 months, friendship had started feeling like possibility. After the ceremony, people toured the facilities, asked questions, offered donations both financial and material. A lumber company pledged wood for projects. A restaurant promised to provide meals for the first year. A local college offered to send counseling interns for clinical training. The community was investing, and that mattered more than any individual contribution. This wasn't Jack's project anymore. It was theirs, all of them. The weight distributed across shoulders built to carry it. As the sun set and people began to leave, Jack walked down to the dock his father had planned to rebuild, but never got the chance. Someone had finished it, he wasn't sure who, and it extended into the lake solid and true. At the end, where the water was deep enough for diving and the view stretched to the mountains beyond, someone had installed a light. Not decorative arting, functional. A beacon strong enough to guide boats in fog or darkness, powered by solar panels and battery backup, designed to run continuously without attention. Automated, reliable, a light that would never go out as long as the sun still rose. Jack stood at the dock's end, Atlas beside him, and watched the light come on as dusk deepened. It swept across the water in a slow rotation, not desperately bright, but persistently visible. The kind of light that said, "Here, this way, you're not alone." Footsteps on the dock behind him, Sarah carrying 2 mugs of coffee, offering one without speaking. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the light work. And Jack thought about his father's final letter. Be the light they need when their own goes dark. This was it. This rotating beacon on a lake in Maine that most people would never see. But the men who needed it would find it, would follow it home, would discover that home wasn't a place they'd left behind, but something they could build here, together, from the wreckage of what they'd lost. Sarah broke the silence. Your father would be proud. Jack shook his head. My father would be relieved someone finally finished what he started. Same thing, Sarah said. Maybe, Jack allowed. She moved closer, not touching, but present. What are you going to do now? The center's open. Brennan's in prison. Mission accomplished. Jack sipped his coffee, let the question settle. There were applications coming in already. Veterans asking about residency, about programs, about whether there was room for one more broken soldier trying to find his way back. The mission wasn't accomplished. It was just beginning. I'm going to stay, he said. Run this place, help where I can, build more if we need it. This is home now. Didn't expect it to be, but it is. Good, Sarah said, because I've been designing an expansion. Second building, workshops for arts and music, therapy through creation. I was hoping you'd let me pitch it. Jack smiled. When? Tomorrow. After breakfast, before the first residents arrive. Deal, Jack said. They stood watching the light sweep across water that was turning from blue to black. The mountains beyond becoming silhouettes against a sky full of stars that were just beginning to show. Atlas settled at their feet, patient and content, a dog who'd found his place same as the people around him. Somewhere in the center behind them, lights were coming on in windows. Moose was probably making dinner, the old Marine unable to stop feeding people, even when people insisted they weren't hungry. Bobby and Roy were likely in the workshop, finding common ground through sawdust and shared focus. Martinez was probably organizing files, preparing for the clinical work that would start Monday. A community forming, a mission continuing, a light that would burn as long as people needed it. Jack thought about his father, about the years of distance and silence, about conversations that never happened and regrets that couldn't be unmade. But he also thought about this land, these buildings, these people who'd come together because one man had believed something better was possible, even when better seemed impossible. Legacy wasn't what you said. It was what you built, what you left behind for others to continue. what you started that mattered enough for people to finish. Daniel Hartwell had built this piece by careful piece through surveillance and sacrifice and secrets he'd kept to protect what he loved. Jack had finished it, turned plans into buildings and vision into reality. But it would belong to all the men who came after, all the broken soldiers looking for a place where being wounded wasn't weakness, but just the price they'd paid for serving. Atlas shifted, looked it up at Jack with eyes that asked the question dogs always asked. Are we staying? Jack reached down, scratched behind ears that had gone mostly gray, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for longer than he wanted to admit. Yeah, boy, we're staying. The light swept past them, continued its rotation, patient and eternal. A promise made visible, a watch being kept, a beacon for the lost saying simply, here, this way, come home. And in the gathering darkness of a spring evening in Pine Harbor, Maine, Jack Hartwell stood at the end of his father's dock and understood what his old man had known all along. Some lights burned out. Some men fell before their work was done. But if the mission mattered, someone would always pick up the torch, would finish what needed finishing, would keep the watch until the next generation could take over. The watch was his now, and he intended to keep it well. Behind him, the Hartwell Veterans Center stood solid and bright, windows glowing with warmth and life and purpose. Inside, men were gathering for dinner, for conversation, for the slow, difficult work of rebuilding lives that war had fractured. Atlas barked once, sharp and certain, the way he did when a mission was complete and satisfactory. Jack smiled, looked at the stars, and whispered to a father who couldn't hear, but maybe somewhere understood. Mission accomplished, Dad. The light's still burning, and I'm not going anywhere. The beacon swept across the lake, across the mountains, across the vast darkness beyond, doing its patient work. And Jack Hartwell, keeper of his father's legacy and guardian of a place where broken men learned to be whole again, stood watch as the first stars emerged and the night turned the world to silver and shadow, and the kind of peace that only came after the fighting was finally, truly done.